What was the biggest fail a new driver has made on their driving test? I was finishing my test, and a man when I went in was yelling at the proctor. Apparently it was unfair that his daughter failed since she can't read English, so she didn't understand what a stop sign meant. Even if you can't read, you should still fricking know what a red octagon on a stick means. I had a driving class in high school that went out in groups to drive. One kid didn't know how to turn off a turn signal. He didn't know that you can flick it off with your hand. After he made the turn, the signal was still on, so he began wildly jerking the wheel left and right, trying to make it stop. My brother taking his driving test. He put his hand on the passenger headrest to brace to look backwards while reversing, and his hand slipped off the rest and slapped the bejesus out of the driving instructor, breaking his glasses and leaving a perfect red handprint on his cheek. He still passed! One of my driving instructor's other students, a 16-year-old girl who went into labor during the driving test, and the examiner had to drive her to the hospital. My driving instructor told me about a previous student who drove directly over a very large mound of grass kind of roundabout. Apparently the examiner wouldn't even let them drive back to the test center, took over the driving for them. My ex failed after the examiner said, "Straight over the roundabout." Well, she drove onto the roundabout and was also failed for not indicating to oncoming traffic when she left the roundabout. My dad was an examiner for a while. Once a girl froze during the test and stopped on railroad tracks, and a train was coming. Not real fast, but fast enough that it might not be able to stop. She wouldn't hit the accelerator as she was frozen in fear, especially after the train blew its horn right into the window. My dad had to put his foot on her side and hit the gas to get off the tracks. And this is one of the reasons why in Germany, the cars for the driving instructors have a gas and brake pedal on the passenger side as well. If the instructor hits one of those during the test, a buzzer goes off, so the examiner in the back knows that the instructor had to intervene. Needless to say, this is an instant fail. Honestly, I thought this system was standard all over the world. Also, we're really just not that much better than those goats that freeze when they hear loud noises, are we? Maybe it works in nature, but it's a real evolutionary flaw in our modern world that we decide to lie perfectly still in exactly the path of this thing that will definitely kill us. My tester told me something I'll never forget. He was driving with a girl and testing her. Here in Arizona, and probably everywhere in the US, the examiner isn't allowed to say anything that isn't a direction, like turn left. Of course, this doesn't work if the driver is a little slow. During the test, she pulls up to a stop sign. She's the first one there, but another car pulls up to the left. She waves them on. Not entirely wrong, but she should have gone first. Not a huge deal, though. Then it happens again. Mind you, she hasn't moved through the intersection. Rather, another car has approached, stopped, and been waved on. There are now 1 or 2 cars behind her. Eventually, there's a huge backup of honking traffic and a small trickle of cars crossing through the intersection in front of her. She finally turns to the instructor and says, "Why are they all mad at me? I have a red light." And that's the story of how a small point deduction failed someone's driving test. Not the examiner, but I was involved. I was driving my regular vehicle into the parking lot of a CDL-only driver facility to renew my CDL. As I was making a right into the parking lot from the public road, a semi-tractor trailer comes flying out of the lot into my right-of-way. I avoid by pulling off onto the grass. The trailer continues onto the road but crosses directly across into the parking lot opposite. I get off the grass, park properly, grab my things and walk into the facility. I was angry, but I wasn't hit, so I wasn't going to go after the guy and cause a fight. About 3 minutes later, a driver examiner walks in screaming about this idiot who's never getting his Class A as long as she lives, and whoever bought him here better not ever let him try again, and needs to go across the street to collect the vehicle and the sorry excuse for a driver. So yeah, I nearly got taken out by a newbie truck driver. I wonder if he ever did pass or if she was truly able to permaban him. Not me, but my driving instructor said a student failed when they forgot to put the car in drive. Did pretty much everything else right, but they were pressing on the gas and were confused as to why they weren't moving. I actually forgot to turn the car on when I first went for my test. I was using my instructor's car and he'd always have it on already when I drove it, so I wasn't prepared, clearly. I still passed, though. I was a new driver. At the time, I read about a new law where drivers could run a stop sign if the driver could see that the intersection was clear. This was considered a rolling stop. I went to my test, drove a stick fluently, rolled through a 4-way stop and the instructor freaked out. That was a 4-way stop. Well, there's a new law to save gas when you're allowed to roll through a stop if the intersection is clear. It was passed in October. It was clear, so I rolled through. Satisfied, the instructor scribbled something on his clipboard. I passed and went back to work. Told the guys that the dumb instructor didn't even know about the new rolling stop law. My colleagues looked aghast. That's not a law. They proposed it in October, and it got shot down. I can't believe he passed you. Whew! My cousin took a turn too fast in Lake Country and flipped the car completely upside down on his first test. Did he pass, or did he get a driver's permit for Australia? I was T-boned by a lady running a red, and I failed. I mean, if you can't complete the test, they can't exactly pass you, even if it's not your fault. There was a big panic and scrambling on the day of my road test. Apparently, a young woman completely blew past a stop sign and got T-boned by a school bus. The girl was hurt, but since it was the examiner's side, they were in a critical condition last I heard. Safe to say she instantly failed. I mean, if the instructor dies during the test, can you really fail? Technically, the only witness to your driving is dead. In college, I had a fraternity brother who was stopped by the police for suspected drunk driving. The driver got out of the car as the police officer approached the car. It's a big no-no in my state. The driver immediately fell to the ground and passed out. He was arrested and the car was impounded. The fraternity's faculty moderator was an attorney and professor. He represented the driver in court. He was acquitted because he had neither failed the sobriety test or breathalyzer, nor did he refuse to take it. This gem is from my examiner. Said the worst he's ever seen was a girl who thought it would be a good idea to try to outrun a train. He told her to stop, and she said no, she's fine. The barrier hit the top of her car and insta-failed after she bottomed out the suspension while speeding. On my test, I passed pretty easily, and when the instructor told me to pull over at the end of the course, she motioned towards a spot with a fire hydrant. Thinking it was a final gotcha, I said, well, there's a fire hydrant there, so I'll go to the next stop. She didn't care, it wasn't a test, but as soon as I parked 3 cars up, a presumably failing testee rear-ended the car I would have been behind at around 15 kilometers per hour. No one left in an ambulance, but the instructor in that car got out rubbing his neck and the car was pretty beat up. If I didn't think my examiner was tricking me, it would have been my car. I had a friend in high school who ran a red light during her exam. She thought it was a left-turn yield, and it was not. She laughed about it later and said the examiner was like, "Why did you do that?" In excess of 25 years ago, the RTA office car park in Albury, New South Wales was where you started your test. There was a stop sign and a solid white line at the exit from the car park. Australian rules make this a compulsory stop. Neophytes would roll through it and thus fail before the front wheels even hit the road. Does an examiner mistake count? Local story, the examiners used to tap the pens on the dashboard to signify when it was time for the emergency stop part of the test. This practice was stopped when, apparently, an examiner absent-mindedly tapped his pen on his clipboard towards the end of one unfortunate soul's test, who misinterpreted this as another emergency stop command. The pen went through the examiner's eye. Where I live, a student drove into the river with her instructor, and both women died. I still don't understand how this could have happened. Well, did she pass? Well, yes and no. Well, the narrator's going to hell for laughing at that last bit, but I'd wager that a few of you others are as well, so I guess I'll see you there. I was at the DMV a few days ago when I overheard a girl crying her eyes out. Apparently there was a pothole in the middle of the road and the examiner told her to go around it using the bike lane since there was no middle lane. She proceeded to do so but drove the rest of the driving test in the bike lane. She was telling her parents it wasn't even her fault because the lady told her to drive in the bike lane. My cousin finished his driving test by driving into the side of the DMV itself, leaving a large hole in the wall. He asked his instructor if he would have passed if he didn't hit the wall, and the instructor just shook his head and failed him. I passed the first time, 100%, although when driving back into the car park of the transport department, I pulled in a little wonkily, so I said, "Oh, I'll fix that for you," reversed back to straighten up, and another car had started to pull out directly behind me, not noticing me, I guess. They were about to hit my car, so I stressed out and put the car into drive to move forward quickly. A little too quickly. I launched my car over the car space barrier thing. I wanted to cry then and there, and he just said, "Okay, I'll meet you inside." I parked the car and sat there for a good minute, knowing that must have made me fail. As I walked inside, I saw all of the instructors standing together with him, and they were all laughing at me. I passed though, so I was happy to laugh along whilst dying inside. Now I have a real fear of hitting those mini concrete barriers when I park. I almost hit a woman with a stroller during my test. There was a shadow from a building covering her and the stroller and sunlight everywhere else. The examiner was surprised and didn't see her herself, so I passed. Don't ask me how, but my friend drove up an exit ramp. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My brother looped his bike on his motorcycle test. He got nervous and gave it way too much throttle and dumped the clutch at the same time. The bike just started rotating out from under him. I'm not an examiner, but damn, it was funny to watch. I passed my third time. I have no idea how good I did though. The Korean woman who tested me looked pretty tired, put her sunglasses down, told me about 2 instructions and then promptly began to doze off during the test. At one point she said, "You know where to go." Entirely skipped the freeway portion of my test. I remember pulling in and I said, "Okay, we're here," and she softly muttered, "Thank God." 100% pass, no mistakes. I guarantee she didn't see a single second of my driving. One of my friends made a pretty brutal mistake. We live in Wisconsin and she took the test on a day where there was a bit of snow. Started the road portion of the test, pulling up to a red light with a pedestrian crossing in the crosswalk. My friend started braking way too late. When she hit the brakes, the wheels just locked up and she slid into the pedestrian, knocking them up onto her hood and breaking the pedestrian's leg. She failed 4 times more after that, but now just uses the road like everyone else. I refused to ever ride in her car. Not awful, but I was definitely embarrassed the whole time. I was nervous on my first test, and when they said, "Start the car and pull onto the road," I turned on the car, then accidentally turned on the windshield wiper fluid and the wipers on full speed and struggled to turn it off. They laughed it off, but I ended up failing anyway. The worst mistake was an examiner giving me a license. I passed with literally the lowest grade. He said he was legally obligated to pass me, but that I shouldn't drive, and he was right. Toward the end of the semester during driver's ed, we were allowed to take the official driving test with our high school instructor, and generally did so in pairs. I went out for my test along with a classmate. I went first and passed my test just fine. My classmate got in the driver's seat, didn't disengage the parking brake, and backed out of the angled parking space the wrong way. This meant immediate failure, and my instructor literally ripped her paper test form thing in half. Felt bad, but it was pretty hilarious. A buddy of mine was born 6 months before me. When we were 13, he bragged continuously about how much sooner he'd have his license compared to me. Anyway, I think he failed his test like 4 times. First time he bumped the curb. Second time, I don't know, but he lost his crap at the instructor. It was the same guy testing him. And then made a huge scene, then failed 2 more times after that. By the time he got his license, he was only on the road for 2 weeks before me. I failed my written test once and my mock driving school test, but I passed my first road test. My instructor said, "Well, you did great, but there's a spliff in your cup holder, so I'm going to have to ask you to try again another time." "That's not mine." "Hey, listen, I was young once too. Don't worry, you'll pass next time." My mum left her Mary J in the car. Not an examiner, but the day I took my test 17 years ago, I was watching the other tests for tips while waiting in line. One kid just finished his test and hit a parked car pulling back into the lot. I overheard the examiner saying that just because he'd already signed the test form, the wreck was on the teenager's license and not himself. As if teenagers' insurance rates aren't already ridiculously high. In driver's ed, I was on my last observation. The guy got in the car and told the instructor he's colorblind. No big deal, wait for it, and that he couldn't rotate his back or turn his head to look for oncoming traffic or pedestrians or people in the other lane. I guess it was genetic because he seemed fine. He had to turn his entire body to see anything. But the driving instructor was cool with it. They had to do all the looking out for the guy. I was scared though. I bet the one with the best answer is no longer here with us. F. The narrator is hitting F and also paying respects. Yes, it has occurred to me that there's definitely a non-zero number of people who've likely died during their tests, which is a sobering thought. Honestly, being an examiner must be a relatively high-stress job now that I think about it. This happened during my test. I just gotten into a little Hyundai as my first car to take my test in, As my mum drove a massive SUV, we hadn't driven it much or anything, but we decided it would suffice. We had to drive about 45 minutes to the testing facility as we lived out in the middle of nowhere. So here I am, 16, nervous as heck, in this new car that we just got, on roads I don't recognize. My instructor had me drive on an old country road where the speed limit was 55 miles per hour, the fastest I'd ever driven. All was going well until I noticed smoke billowing out of my driver wheel well. My car was on fire. Something had bounced up into my tires and burst into flames. After the whole ordeal was over, the instructor passed me despite not completing the maneuverability part of the exam. The cool thing was that the car was totaled due to the fire, and I ended up getting another, way better, non-exploding vehicle. I managed to stall the car on top of a roundabout. Luckily, it wasn't a proper test, but just my dad with a printout of the assessment rubric. It did mark the end of his attempts to teach me how to drive a manual before an automatic. He then did the sensible thing of teaching me the skills required to drive an automatic, then put me back in the manual to learn how to do that without also having to panic about the driving part. I drove across a 6-lane highway because I assumed they all had a stop sign. My examiner nearly crapped his pants. And no, I didn't pass, but I did the next time. My examiner told the story which I haven't forgotten. I'd gotten docked points for not slowing down enough through an uncontrolled intersection. Fair enough. A couple of months prior, a girl had done that and got T-boned by a pickup truck. Yikes. It's funny how those things make an impression on you. My examiner told me my shoulder check when turning right from a stop was barely adequate and that I slowed down too much when about to exit the highway. I thought I was going to fail, but I didn't. And I've made very careful shoulder checks and been aware of traffic behind me when exiting to this day. This is kind of the opposite. Me as the student, but the driving instructor grabbed my wheel on numerous occasions, and on one occasion she grabbed it and was yelling at me to turn into the left lane, which I was doing. However, I was waiting for the driver to get out of my blind spot, and she kept forcing the wheel left as I fought right, and she only let go once the other driver honked at us. Is a driving instructor ever allowed to grab the wheel? I don't understand. The first time I took my test, we started out with maneuvers. For the life of me, probably due to nerves, I couldn't do a reverse bay park right. After about 4 minutes of watching me struggle, the instructor just said, "Let's leave it, huh?" I did the rest of the test anyway for practice, and apparently I would have passed on that, but I failed before I even left the car park of the test center. Oh, mine was a doozy. Got in, put it in reverse, and backed directly into a truck. No damage, still failed though. My ex-girlfriend was taking the test and was asked to demonstrate hand signals. Used left arm to show left turn, right turn, stop. Examiner then asked her to put the window down and demonstrate again without cramming her arm into the window. We have 3 levels of driving tests in my area, 2 tests in vehicle. My first driving test in a vehicle, I saw one person testing being crashed into by another person being tested. For my second in-vehicle test, the person returning when I arrived was followed by a police car. Not an examiner, but my friend once got into an accident during his driver's test. He got confused about a 4-way stop, stopped in the middle of an intersection, then didn't want to get hit by a car coming at him, so he reversed into the car behind him. Whoops! I honestly did pretty well on my whole test and made it all the way back to the DMV. The final test was pulling into a parking spot. The DMV in my city is part of a strip mall with a restaurant directly to the left of the building with outside seating. There were so many open spots and I chose the parking spot right in front of a group of people eating lunch. I rammed right into a guy in his chair that was sitting a couple of inches from the curb. Failed immediately and the examiner lost their crap on me for a solid 5 minutes on my birthday. I waited till the next month to retake the test in the next town over, as it's less busy on the roads and I felt like I couldn't show my face at the first DMV. I walked in, gave my name, and immediately the examiner goes, "Oh my gosh, are you the girl who hit someone in their chair?" I was so embarrassed, but thankfully I still passed. I was the examiner and I was giving this kid his driving test for the second time. We were driving down a 4-lane highway. Now it's my job to make sure he knows how to safely and properly change lanes. When I looked, this kid had plenty of space. I tell him to change lanes. He swerves over without barely a glance, and at this point a car had come flying up out of nowhere. Well, he changes lanes and the car apparently swerves to avoid him. The next thing I see is a car flying through the air across the 4-laner and landing in someone else's yard from behind us. He panicked and I kind of freaked out too. The driver was okay and the person whose yard it was freaked, but it was okay too. By some miracle, that car managed to not hit another car. Needless to say, the kid didn't pass. Again. I think he took the test 2 more times before he finally got it. Scared the crap out of me. There was also a brother and sister who nearly killed me twice in less than 20 minutes. One pulled out in front of a rollback who barely slammed on the brakes in time to not hit us, but I could count the bugs in the grill. The other turned in front of an 18-wheeler. Good times. Good times. This was a high school driving course. Was driving on a back road when my teacher said, "What are you doing?" in the calmest voice. I said, "What do you mean?" Turns out my dumb butt was driving on the wrong side of the road for like a whole minute. Luckily, the road was empty, or else that conversation would have ended a lot differently. Funnily enough, I still got my permit at the end of the course. My cousin's girlfriend at the time thought that you could make a left turn on a red if clear. Needless to say, she immediately failed, and the guy was so freaked out he drove back to the DMV for her.
What's something that's common knowledge at your workplace that will be mind-blowing to the rest of us? Disclaimer, this thread was made 11 years ago. Please use discretion if you decide to follow any advice given in these responses. There's a good chance that it's incredibly outdated by now. With that being said, let's move on to the video. For example, I'm not in law enforcement, but I learned that special units such as SWAT are just normal cops during the day, giving out speeding tickets and breaking up parties, contrary to my imagination where they sat around waiting for a bank robbery to happen. The fajitas at Chili's aren't actually sizzling. They have a sauce called, quote, sizzle sauce that you spray over the hot food so it gives the illusion that it is sizzling. When you have an IV placed, there isn't actually a needle left in your arm. The needle is taken out and a tiny, flexible plastic tube is left in. So many people think that they are walking around with a needle in their arm and are afraid to move it around. Chemistry grad student. Safety regulations happen when EPA inspectors come by, not any time else. Casino dealers are not out to take your money. We live off tips. We want you to win. Strawberries are picked by hand. It sucks. 2/3 of Staples' annual profits occur during the 2 to 4 week period of back-to-school shopping. Technical writer. Lots of people work really hard to write all those electronics manuals that you don't read. Also, manuals are considered legal documents. If a client injures themselves following a set of bad instructions, the company can be held accountable. If you're going to the dentist to get work done, fillings, crowns, etc., and you use cocaine, tell your dentist. Cocaine use, within the 24 hours or even more, plus dental work equals medical emergencies and often death. So, moral of the story, don't do coke and then get a filling. Or just don't do coke in general. I feel like telling people not to do hard drugs is pretty good advice. If you knew just how much money was dumped down the drain in emergency medical services for non-emergent calls and straight up BS, your head would explode. I work in a rural system, and I've seen people burn more money in a year than they would ever make in their entire lives on EMS that they aren't paying for. This is for routine or made-up stuff. I just remembered this from my days as a car salesman, and I have never been happier from being fired from a job than the day my sales manager said, "You're a good guy, but this isn't going to work out." To see how much that used car really is, look for a sticker. Ours were red on the windshield and look for a number. Example, 191-377-499. The first and the last 2 numbers are the model year. The numbers in the middle is the price that the dealership sets. Anything above that is going to be commission for the salesman. Haggle accordingly. If you make a lane change on the highway and cut close in front of my big rig, you aren't making me mad. You are scaring the crap out of me. Because if you blow a tire or if anything else causes you to sharply lose speed at that moment, I will roll over you like a 40-ton avalanche and they will have to wash you and your children out of the wreckage with a hose. I work as a barista during the school year. One thing that a lot of our customers don't seem to know is that the dark roast coffee actually has the lowest amount of caffeine on the roast spectrum. So many night shift workers will come in right before we close and ask for the darkest roast we have because they need to stay up all night. We always correct them and assure them that our lightest roast has the most caffeine. I think people assume that dark roast has more because it has a stronger coffee taste. So they think that a stronger coffee taste equals more beans used to make it equals more caffeine. Not quite. We used 80 grams of beans, no matter the roast, to make around 2.3 liters of coffee. At the shop where I worked, I'm sure this is the same for many other coffee shops as well. Dark roast coffee and light roast coffee are made from the same beans. Dark roast coffee, as the name implies, is roasted the longest. The beans get that bitter and burnt taste, but more caffeine is burned off in the process. Since light roast is not processed for as long, more caffeine actually stays in the coffee beans. TLDR, if you need to stay up all night, light roast coffee has the most caffeine. Geneticist here. It is estimated that about 10% of children in genetic studies are, quote, non-paternities, meaning 10% of the kids in the studies don't have the same biological father as we are told they have. Edit, wanted to clarify some things. This could happen when children aren't informed a sperm donor was used, the children didn't know they were adopted, or some other mix-up. The 10% comes from genetic disease studies, not just paternity testing. The 10% figure is often quoted in scientific articles, but some studies have been published which suggest the 10% figure is an overestimate. While it is not possible with current technology to revive large organisms that have been cryogenically frozen, it is entirely possible to revive cells that have been cryopreserved. It gets cooler. We can store cells in a deep freeze state about -200 Celsius and bring them back years later. The cells will thaw, grow, reproduce, and continue on their respective merry ways as if nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. Edit, woke up to a bunch of replies, so I'll clarify some of the top questions. Number 1. Why don't the cells burst? We use a cryoprotectant before we freeze down the cells. This prevents the water in the cells from crystallizing when it freezes. We stick the cells in special vials and put the vials in this temperature-regulating chamber that looks something like a large revolver chamber. This slows the freezing process to an acceptable rate. Once the cells reach -80 degrees Celsius, they are taken out of the regulating chamber and transferred to -200 degrees Celsius. Number 2. What's preventing you from scaling this up to animals or humans? Let me preface this answer with the disclaimer. I am not a cryogenicist. Part of my job involves storing cell lines in cryogenic states. That being said, the biggest obstacle to overcome if we were to revive frozen people would be the brain. Cells don't have brains. Cells don't even have organs. You may argue from high school biology that they have organelles, but that's not the same thing. Cells are essentially macromolecular machines. You can leave your car sitting in the driveway unattended for a couple years, and it will still run when you come back. Might need a jump or an oil change, but the analogy holds. Number 3. What cells are we talking about here? Malignant ones. Various assortments of cancer cell lines. They tend to grow a bit faster than their non-malignant counterparts and, quote, recover from freezing faster, but both malignant and non-malignant cells will recover and grow after freezing. The throttle of go-karts is located just above the motor and can make your cart anywhere from 5 to 10 miles per hour faster. I've worked at multiple retirement homes. The senior citizen residents hook up with each other quite frequently. I work with children. In regards to potty training, kids are more likely to be able to go if their feet are on a flat surface. If you don't have a potty chair for them, give them a step stool or a box or something so their feet don't dangle. Helicopter auto-rotation is something designed for and tested during helicopter development. The Helo is able to perform various maneuvers, fly forward at X speed, turn left/right at X speed, Y bank angle, etc., without engine power. Helicopter pilots routinely practice these, and not just pray the aircraft comes to the ground softly if power is lost. The reason a lot of military units have massive budgets is because the defense funding system works on a use-it-or-lose-it system. We may not need our full budget one year, but we're a deploying unit that is deploying next year and will need it then. If we don't spend it all by September 1st, the fiscal year starts October 1st. When the new budget comes out, we will have reduced funds. So units frequently spend all the money they are allotted in order to have guaranteed funding for when they need it. If the system didn't punish units for being frugal and made it easy to acquire funds needed for training and equipment, we could reduce spending quite a bit most of the time. 90% of professional brewing is cleaning things. Beer is simple and a naturally occurring substance. We just make it easier for the yeast to do their job by monitoring temperatures, anticipating problems, and cleaning. It's honestly hard to add to this thread. It's common knowledge where I work. For instance, opening a tank of fermenting beer to, quote, see how it's going will probably make you pass out from CO2 inhalation and, worst case, kill you. We frequently get drunk college students on tours asking if they can go inside a tank of beer. No, you will die. Also, we don't spend all day drinking beer and looking at samples. Mostly, it's lifting heavy stuff, cleaning, getting dirty, moving heavy stuff, and did I mention cleaning? Content warning: animal death. From working at a kennel, a lot of places only have a few sizes for coffins should you want the kennel to bury your deceased pet for you. If your pet is too big to fit one, he/she will be made to fit in it. Working at a few vets, I have no idea how common knowledge this is, but I had no idea until I worked there. But if you see an injured animal on the side of the road that isn't yours, you can bring it into most places and they will treat the animal at no cost to you. If the animal dies, it will also be buried at no cost to you. Good Samaritan laws or something like that. If your animal has gotten into illegal drugs, just tell us. We don't care. Our business is treating your animal appropriately as fast as possible. Just freaking tell us. It will save you money in the long run since we don't need to go through so many wild diagnostic measures, and your poor balls-tripping pet can get its system cleared before anything too bad happens. If your cat is in for treatment and bites one of us and has not had or is overdue for its rabies vaccine, the animal will be contained after the bite, and if it shows symptoms, it will then be euthanized and put down. This is purely personal, but if your pet is at a certain elderly age, 12 plus, and having major issues, please just consider euthanization. The amount of money you'll spend on the insane amount of treatments to keep your pet alive for another few months is not worth it. And the amount of suffering the animal endures from all the treatments is also not worth it. So many animals come in that would really be better off going peacefully into the bright light, but owners just can't let go. It's frustrating to watch. Most private colleges, especially those with high endowments and a considerable amount of prestige, will send a list of each year's applicants to their communications/development office. They'll research the kids and their families and give them a rating based on the potential the kid has to add to the endowment, basically an assessment of family wealth/potential. This is used more to distinguish between the multitude of wealthy kids who apply to such colleges. If you're poor, most schools will see that as added diversity and will help your chances at acceptance. I worked in a cardboard factory for a while, taking huge rolls of paper and gluing/baking them into cardboard sheets, boxes, etc. That warm, delicious smell that comes from your closed takeaway pizza as you drive home, it's mostly not the pizza. It's the sugar, starch, and animal fat in the cardboard and glue. The cardboard factory smelled exactly like takeaway pizza. Former prison guard here. Most inmates do not have access to weights more than 2 to 4 times per month, and only if they've earned it with good behavior. The going rate for cigarettes on the prison black market is $100 a box. If you are willing to go a few years without any friends, and you have about $100 a month of expendable income, depending on your crime, you can go your entire sentence without being in a fight or joining a gang. Non-consensual penetration happens in prison, but it isn't nearly as common as it was 30 years ago. Inmates have an anonymous hotline they can call if they want to report, and now there are cameras almost everywhere except for cells. That's where most penetration happens, and there's not a lot prison guards can do to stop it. 95% of what you see in prison TV shows or movies is creative thinking. Your first day in prison, I do not recommend picking a fight with the biggest, toughest looking guy in prison, or fighting with the first person who's a jerk to you. It won't make you look tough. More likely, you'll just go to seg for a few weeks before getting kicked out into a new unit, where you'll have to do it all over again. Instead, find out who is in charge of your race. If you're white, it'll probably be Aryan Brotherhood or Peckerwood. Then either join up or ask how much it costs to be protected. This is called paying rent. You won't make any friends paying rent, so plan on reading a lot. If you don't have the money or the desire to be extorted, you can join the gang. I wouldn't recommend this unless you're going to be down for a long time. You'll start out on the bottom of the prison gang hierarchy. After initial training period of working out, you'll be asked to do hits on enemies of the gang. The shot callers will tell you who and when you'll be attacking, and you'll be expected to follow through. The problem with this is that you'll likely be given additional time on your sentence, so if your goal is to get out of prison, this isn't the recommended route. Plus, you'll be required to get gang tattoos, which will make it difficult to live normally after prison, and are often accompanied with hepatitis C, HIV, and tuberculosis. It depends on the state, but guards in the towers are carrying weapons with live ammunition. Prison guards tend to be rednecks with fairly good aim. If you're going to kick someone's butt, don't do it in the yard. If you are perceived by a tower guard as putting someone in a position of substantial bodily harm or risk of life, you will be killed. Perimeter towers are also armed with live ammunition. If you are going to try to escape, your best bet is tunneling out or stealing a guard uniform or impersonating a staff member, etc. Over the fence will probably get you shot, unless you have friends who have bribed the guard in the tower. If you're in for anything inappropriate, you're gonna have a bad time. TLDR, don't go to prison. It sucks. Wendy's actually cracks and cooks a fresh egg every time you order a breakfast sandwich, and the chili does not come out of a can. Yeah, I see you, Wendy. I see you commenting on that Reddit post. You're not fooling anyone, pigtails. Lie to me all you want, but we know that fresh, never frozen beef is a cover-up. What next? You gonna tell us you raise chickens in the back? You have a garden where all your vegetables come from? Does Wendy herself slaughter the cow? I've got my eye on you, pigtails. This war ain't over. And now it's time for the men of Reddit to leave the room because this might make you cross your legs. When a urinary catheter is placed, a tiny balloon is then filled inside the bladder so the catheter stays in place and doesn't, quote, slip out. If a catheter is pulled out before the balloon is deflated, it shreds the urethra and is a bloody mess. Don't ever pull out your catheter. Ever. Update, another fun fact about catheters. For men, it is best for them to be hard. It makes placing the catheter a lot easier. So if a nurse has ever said thank you while placing a catheter in your semi-erect dingling, you know why. Failing a student is absolute agony for most professors. We will often look for any loophole we can find to let you pass the class, because frankly, having to tell you that you're failing is one of the worst things we will have to do for our job all year. We think about you when we turn in our grades, and we torture ourselves about it afterward. Unless your professor is truly a jerkwad, when you fail a class, you have legitimately failed that class. P.S. Grading papers takes a really long time. Coca-Cola employee here. Fun fact, that crisp, sharp smell that Coca-Cola and Diet Coke give off? Strictly phosphoric acid. When I worked at AMC, we don't clean the theaters after every movie. We just sweep the popcorn under the seats, try to pick up all the big trash, and put all the armrests down. Cinemark is much more demanding. Every kernel of popcorn must be eliminated. I worked at an optometrist's office for about 2 years and sold glasses. We sold more high-end stuff, but had basically everything. What some people don't realize is that if your prescription is really strong, you should shell out the extra money for the better lens material and maybe for that anti-reflective coating. It will make a huge difference in clarity, especially if you drive at night. If you have a really low prescription, screw it, get the cheap lenses, you won't notice. Also, if you wear contacts, freaking give your eyes a break every now and then. If you wear them for the moment you wake up until right before you go to bed, your eyesight will get way worse way faster. You risk serious infection, and you're kind of suffocating your eyes. Even if you have the kind that you can wear for 30 days straight, you sure as heck better have at least one pair of crappy glasses you can wear if you ever tear a lens into your eye or lose/run out of contacts. Healthcare worker. If we have to phone a patient at home and someone else answers, we are not allowed to identify where we are calling from or why. So, say we need to ring John Q. Citizen and his wife answers. Then we can only say, "May I speak to John Citizen, please?" Wife will ask who it is. Our name. Wife will ask, "Where are you from?" Or, "Why do you need to speak to John?" "I can't discuss that with you. Could you please put John on the phone?" Etc., etc. It causes so many issues. We would love to just say I'm calling about his blood test, but we are legally not allowed to do so. I'm not being obstructionist or rude. Please just suck it up and pass the phone over. When you visit a single page of Amazon.com, or pretty much any large-scale website, no less than 30 computers put the page together. We're talking servers that have sub-millisecond round-trip times between nodes. When they reboot, it takes an hour to refill the cache, so all results from those machines are discarded until 99.9% of the results are instant. At Outback Steakhouse, they will prepare your food however the heck you want. They'll put your sirloin in a blender if you want. Get creative. Edit, I think Outback owes me a gift card or something for all this free advertising I just gave them. I can confirm this. I once ordered a BLT, which isn't on the menu, at Outback Steakhouse, and my waiter asked me what I wanted on it. I was dumbfounded. I'm just a cashier and don't have the power/authority/ability to do most of what you want or expect me to do. I'm gonna end this on an extremely long, extremely unnecessary inkjet cartridge rant. I work for a major ink and toner remanufacturer. Guys, really, just stop goddamn printing stupid stuff. You don't need it. You are getting raked over the coals, even by me selling remans to you at 40% off. A 5,000 milliliter bottle of our most common ink costs us $120. HP 60s are our most common cartridge. They will only hold 6 milliliters. 6! We sell them for $10. Also, those cartridges are garbage. For the love of everything you find holy, stop buying HP's junk. They are made to fail to make my job harder, and since they fail on the consumer too, they just make their lives harder. Why keep giving money to a company that is actively malicious towards you? Buying an inkjet printer that is an ink tank style system will save you countless dollars and headaches, if it is a Canon or Brother. Lexmark and Epson are made to self-destruct and are also less cost-effective than Brother or Canon. These new HP 950/951s self-destruct. The 564, 920, 940 didn't, but HP made those all to be miserable to operate when using remans. For many integrated printhead carts, or drums in the case of the toners, you pay a premium to replace the printhead each time when you don't need to. HP 21, 27, or 56 carts have a page counter on them of somewhere around 2,200 to 2,500 pages. I've had older 56s stop working for customers due to the page counter before the printhead wore out. My test machine doesn't check the page counter, so it could give me a perfect print, but the actual printer will check the counter. Also, in those 21, 27, 56 cartridges, HP changed the composition of the ink to where it pretty much destroys the printhead. These make my job miserable at times, but I have worked it out to have about an 80% success rate on them now. Lexmark, Epson, and HP, and Kodak, but I'll have self-destructing cartridges. Epson for a while had self-destructing printers. Lexmark also installs a process called LexBCE that makes your print spooler dependent on it. Good luck. Lexmark are the highest cost to operate printers by far, the least reliable/lowest quality, and the most scummy company out of the bunch. Brother are generally the least expensive and have the least issues because they keep things simple. An inexpensive to operate Brother will suit most any home consumer's needs. I am not being paid by Brother. I just like that they are the least crappy to the consumer. Honestly, the only time I recommend something other than Brother is when my customer wants to print photos. Then I recommend a Canon ink tank style system. The current generation are the PGI 225/CLI 226, and they are good little cartridges, and I have sold hundreds, and can count the chip failures on one hand with fingers to spare, and even those shocked me. Now please, Canon, don't make me look like a fool. If you can find an old HP printer that took the 45 or 78 cartridges at Goodwill or wherever for cheap, it's probably worth the investment to grab it. Yes, the 60s are quote cheaper, but the 45's OEM are about 35 for 42 milliliters of ink, where the 60s are about 15 for 6 milliliters. You are getting conned hard on quote cheap ink. I'm looking at you too, Kodak. Lexmark and HP send out firmware updates without your knowledge that disable your ability to use aftermarket products that are entirely legal to use. Remans are. Counterfeits are not. I'm sure it mentions it in that EULA you didn't read. My job is far, far more complicated than just shoot some ink into it, no matter what those stupid advertisements from HP claimed. Everything gets electronically tested, cleaned thoroughly, tested again, filed under vacuum, and tested again. Quote, just shooting ink into it works about 1% of the time if the cartridge just ran out of ink. When I tell you I need your empties back to keep up my stock, I mean it. I'm not trying to screw you out of your little Office Max rewards. I need your empties back to do my freaking job. Finally, one of my good friends works at a big box office supply store. Stop grousing to these people about the cost of ink. There was almost no markup on it whatsoever at the retail level. If you're paying $40 for a stinking 12ml Lexmark 16 at Staples, Staples probably spent $39 on it. Some of this, while mundane to me now, elicits a response from my customers, so hopefully it fits into the discussion. TLDR, I know way too freaking much about inkjet cartridges.
People that quit their job in a hilarious fashion, how did you do it? My wife worked for a certain chain coffee shop a few years ago. She got another job, so requested reduced hours. This didn't happen for 3 straight weeks. During that 3rd week, she had a soccer mum from hell trying to get her attention by throwing fricking snowballs at her through the drive-thru window. My wife then stopped what she was doing and tossed the soccer mum's iced tea at her, which exploded everywhere and slammed the window. 5 minutes later, she had written her letter of resignation with the only things she could find: a purple crayon and a sticky note. I used to work at a place that rhymes with Pizza Hut, and the managers there were real cheapskates. There was this nice old man that would come in every Sunday and order a triple extra cheese pizza, and while they charged him for 3 times the cheese, they would forbid us from ever actually putting that much cheese on a pizza because apparently cheese in the pizza selling world is akin to gold. So instead of 3 times extra cheese, he would really be getting what the instructions would qualify as barely enough for a regular cheese pizza. On the day my 2 weeks' notice ended, the old guy just happened to be my last order, so I went into the walk-in and grabbed an entire box of cheese and proceeded to dump the entire thing onto his pizza, and tossed it into the oven. It was stacked so high that it couldn't even fit into it, and half of it was scraped off. Anyway, the look on the old guy's face when he saw me do this made it all worth it. Imagine pure excitement. Needless to say, I didn't put the correct phone number down for future job references. That poor guy probably ordered double cheese and then thought, well crap, this isn't enough either, and went with triple, only to be given the same amount anyway. Worked in pizza place for 5 years. Cheese is definitely the gold of that world. It's the most expensive thing on the pizza. Dough and sauce cost almost nothing. As a home pizza enthusiast, this is definitely true. Especially when you get deep into the hobby, you will spend a damn fortune on that edible gold. Worked as a teller at a bank for a few years. GM and supervisor were both kind of crappy in their own ways. My buddy there was also a teller who felt similarly and wanted to get out. We started applying in places and both got interviews at the same company. As luck would have it, we both got hired and phone calls about 10 minutes apart. There was only one other teller aside from us, and when it got busy, supervisor usually had to jump in as well, and usually hated it. It felt like we were constantly short-staffed, and days when one person would call out sick or be on vacation would suck. Being down 2 people was the worst. Naturally, when we both got hired, it became a race to see who could turn in their 2 weeks' notice first. He printed his off and raced into the GM's office, walking out with a big smile. GM calls me in and offers me full-time hours after I had been requesting them for months. I jumped in saying, "Let me stop you right there. I'm also turning in my 2 weeks' notice." Remembering that look of disbelief will make me smile every time. A solid professional FU is just as enjoyable to me as going out with a bang. Wrote a normal letter of resignation before I got in the shower one morning. No big deal, got into the office and was straight ignored by management. Oh well, told you when my last day was. Fast forward 3 days, they pull me into a conference room to ask what it would take to keep me. I say, nothing, but don't want to ruin them. Sole IT manager for a staff of 70, and would be willing to consult part-time. They liked that idea and said they'd be willing to pay me my current hourly as a consultant. I was prepared for this and told them that that wasn't what I said. I said I would consult, and my consulting rate was $200 an hour. They were flabbergasted and insulted. I was making about $18 an hour as a salary. They thought it was insane, even though they'd pay a consulting firm $600 an hour when I was on vacation. Needless to say, having planned to quit, it was no skin off my back, and laughed about it. They didn't take kindly to me laughing about their anger and told me to pack my crap. I did so, got an extra 10 days vacation paid out of it. 1992. I was 19 and working at the most pissant radio studio imaginable, AM Country Gold. The notoriously cheap, abusive and dishonest owner, a fella named Wes, had just screwed me out of a promised bonus. It was the latest in a long line of dishonest acts and I'd had enough. The rest of the sales team was afraid to stand up to Wes and he screamed abuse at them constantly. Except the lone woman, who he was constantly a creep to. They were all in their 30s and 40s working the same garbage job I was, but desperately needed it. I didn't. So I engaged in a very public shouting match with Wes in the lobby, saying all the things everyone there had always wanted to say. Then I swept the contents of the front desk onto the floor and stormed out. Instead of leaving, I went around the side of the building to a payphone and called the radio station request line. In a fake southern accent, I said, "Hey y'all, I just told my cheap no-good lying piece of human garbage boss to go to hell. Play me out with, take this job and shove it, and dedicate it to my former boss, Wes." The disc jockey had no idea what had just happened in the lobby, or that my Wes was the Wes, so he enthusiastically played my recorded dedication and added, "This one is for you, Wes. Choke on it, you sack of crap." The building had speakers inside and out, constantly playing the radio feed, so I got to hear Wes get clowned by his own radio studio before driving off into the sunset. Someone at my previous workplace, a huge grocery store in a large mall, went to the PA system we use to issue messages to the whole mall and said something along the lines of, "Dear customers, managers and co-workers, I fricking quit," and then proceeded to leave. Someone did this at the Walmart I worked at. Customer busybodies complained because of the curse word. The manager just asked, "What do you want me to do? He already quit." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's really nothing I can do. As you already heard yourself, he frickin' quit." I wrote a respectful letter thanking them for the opportunity and all they've taught me. The first letter of every sentence spelled out F-U-C-K, boss's name. Nobody noticed. I knew someone who worked in a really crappy call center. His boss never had time for anyone. When he went to tell his boss that he was leaving, the boss waved him out of the room as he was on call. So he wrote, "I quit" on a post-it note, stuck it on the boss's screen, and just walked out. I did this when I worked at Kaufman's. I went up to HR to give my 2 weeks notice, GTFO, but before I could even get a word out, the HR lady flapped her hand at me and told me to come back in an hour because she was going on lunch. So I wrote, "I quit" on a piece of paper, signed and dated it, and left it on her desk. She called me later to let me know that since I didn't give 2 weeks notice, I would never be eligible to work for Kaufman's or Macy's ever again. I told her I'd just have to live with that. I do love it when people threaten to cut off a tie that I have clearly just severed myself. Bad jobs, bad exes, crappy ex-friends. I don't care if you never want to talk to me again. That was actually the point. I used to work for my father. It was probably the worst time of my life. He treated me like absolute crap, paid me very poorly, and made me work 70+ hours a week. I was young, just out of high school, and I complained about my predicament a lot. His response was always, "If you don't like it, there's the door." 6 months before I quit, he made me run his night shift, which meant 6 p.m. through 6:30 a.m. Monday through Saturday. I was very unhappy about this, so I applied for another job. I got it and went to my father's office with a list of demands. He responded with his usual reply, so I said, "Alright, I've gotten a job offer somewhere else. Frick you, I quit." The look on his face was priceless. He truly believed that because I had an amazing job security, that I'd be willing to put up with anything and that I'd stay there for my entire career. In one short, sweet instant, I proved to him that this was not the case, and he lost his most valuable employee. The icing on the cake was the fact that the job that I left him for is at the company that manufactures the very machinery and software he relies on in business. So anytime something goes wrong in his factory, he has to call me to fix it for him. So, how are family events these days? Honestly, they're much better than they used to be. I hated working for him so much and wasted some of my best years slaving away for him without so much as a thank you. I never actually talked to him when I worked for him. I'd have formal discussions when I had to for work, but outside of work I literally never saw him. Now I don't really have any issues with him at all. First job when I was 15 for a discount clothing brand store. Head manager was the aunt for our store manager, who was 19. Our store manager did nothing most of the time and used to chat to her boyfriend and friends quite loudly on the store phone, much to the annoyance of everybody. One night, it's come closing, we're grabbing our coats and getting ready to leave after a really busy day, and the store manager storms in, telling us how she's lowered the shutters and won't let us leave until we've helped her finish the one job she had all day to do, cause her aunt is doing a surprise inspection in the morning. Everyone is teed off, especially the people who've had to watch her do literally nothing all day. She turns spiteful, threatening to delay our pays, dock our wages, etc. All bullcrap. For one woman, it was the last straw. She had a kid to pick up from a club, so she waited till she left us alone to work, walked up to the shutters, pulled them up manually by hand, and all of us crawled out to freedom. We left her a note saying, "Good luck explaining to your aunt why 4 people just quit." During my exit interview, I told HR the real reason I was leaving was due to the quality of the office chairs. I said they were an eyesore, uncomfortable, and made me ashamed to come to work and resulted in subpar job satisfaction. 2 weeks later, I was told by previous co-workers everyone got brand new, top-of-the-line office chairs. I worked for my aunt for nearly 5 years. It was a product delivery and retail store. When I came to work there, I was originally supposed to be running computers and taking orders to cover for them in the week they all took vacations. As time went on, I started running the retail part on Saturdays, and my willingness to do so was the only reason they opened on the fricking weekend. I took over the office running by myself on Sundays as well, and at a point worked 7 days straight for a month or more until someone realized I might need a break. My cousin was in charge of the front retail, and she resented me for working in the back with her mother. She snapped one day and started being rude and abrasive to customers, so we got switched front to back. I worked every single job in that place, save for driving the box trucks. I'd had enough when they hired a new guy who I found out was making exactly the same an hour as me, $8.25. Never work for family. That sucks, I'm sorry, and you're right. Never work for family, never rent from family, never loan money to family. Business is business, personal is personal. Keep them separate. I worked for a law firm doing research and analysis. I wrote a custom program on my own time that would automate editing down these huge lists we'd get from an outside vendor, boiling it down to only what we wanted. First, only my team used the code. By the time I left, over 150 people were using it. It sounds minimal, but it was actually a huge time saver. The program would boil down a list, 100 pages long, to about 10 pages, a process we used to do manually a couple of times a day. A layoff was announced, and I was part of the outplacement, but the firm wanted to continue using my program. I asked if there would be compensation as it was coded on my own time, never paid for it, etc. I was told no, and besides, there's nothing really keeping us from using it when you're gone. For the remainder of my time, 2 years, I would create patches whenever the format of the data changed. With my last patch, I put in code that would disable the program and erase key parts of the program 1 month after my last day. From what I understand from people still with the firm, on day X, everyone came in, booted their machines, and the program was simply gone. Efficiency fell through the floor, delaying opening cases, billing clients, etc. I wanted 10K, they lost more than that in the first week without the program. Some have stated I might have been in a position to sue for compensation instead. This was a huge law firm, billed in the hundreds of millions a year, and had thousands of very talented attorneys. I could have sued, sure, but they could have made it very expensive for me, dragged it out so long, it would have cost me way too much. This is my third quitting stories batch of posts with this channel, and I'm not sure I'll ever get tired of this particular subject. There is some real vicarious joy to be had with people sticking it to their bosses. I was working for Argos as a Christmas job while studying. After a while, it was becoming too much as I had to stay in work until deliveries were unpacked. This meant some days I was leaving for my college at 8:30 a.m. and not getting home until 1 a.m. that night. One night was a particularly large delivery and it was getting very late with no end in sight. I decided I'd had enough and told the supervisor I was finished, didn't want to do the job anymore and wanted to go home. He rejected this and said I was going nowhere until the delivery was unpacked. I stood in front of him and repeated that I quit, therefore I don't care about the delivery. Completing my studies was more important to me than earning an extra bit of cash. He still said I was going nowhere and refused to unlock the door to let me out. Despite feeling I had case for false imprisonment, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I ran out the fire escape door and down the street never to return. I'll always remember the sound of the fire escape door making a big dong as it hit the metal railings, and I made my escape to freedom. Worked in a video store, back when there was such a thing. My coworker showed up having taken clearly a lot of green herb. He was also about 6'3" and 140 pounds, so he stood out in a crowd to begin with. Anyway, he came in for a 4-hour shift, stood in the middle of our bank of checkout registers and just ate chips. Like 6 bags of chips back to back, and he ate them slow, and he savored the crap out of each bite. The whole time he had zero facial expression. Think of the dull stare of a chewing dairy cow. After about 3 hours, he calmly turns to me and says, "I can't do this anymore," and gently sets down his bag of chips and walks out the door. We never saw him in the store again. At 16, I worked at a Dairy Queen brazier in Texas. My manager was a jerk. One night, I sliced a good chunk of my thumb off because they did not have the proper safety equipment. After being out of work for 3 weeks, I returned to work. My thumb was still pretty screwed up, but I was trying. My manager kept riding me, telling me I had to move faster. I was the only short-order cook when I saw 3 Greyhound buses pull up, and I knew I was in trouble. She came back into the kitchen and said if I didn't move fast for these buses, she'd find someone who would. That was the last straw. I knew no one in the entire restaurant could cook, so I took her up on her threat and simply walked out the back door. She flipped me off as I drove away. My friends told me that they hardly got any orders out and the buses left since they couldn't get the food out. I felt bad for the people on the buses, but I was sick of being berated by management. Worked in the cinema as a teenager, came in late for work after they changed my schedule during my days off and didn't think to mention it to me. Boss lost it and started shouting at me. As far as I'm concerned, if you need to shout, I'm not even listening. So I let her rant away for a good 15 minutes while I was at my locker clearing it out. When it finally clicked that I wasn't listening or getting ready to work, she stopped and asked what I was doing. I said, "Going to see Lord of the Rings with the lads who've just finished, as I'm doing nothing else with my evening. Might go for a pint after. What's your plans?" I like this one. It's simple and clear, and you didn't curse or scream at her. When my boss was having a meltdown, one of my coworkers kept saying, "Didn't catch that. Could you speak up?" She literally lost her voice, screaming at him. I worked for AmITheA garage. One week we got a new service manager, and up until that point we always inspected, estimated, and sold our own jobs. This new guy wanted to inspect the cars and then checked the estimates. Early on Saturday morning, a girl in her 20s with a baby came into the shop and said her brakes were making noise. I took the ticket, test drove the car, and then pulled it into the shop and then inspected the car. I found the LR brake shoe had gone metal to metal. I mic'd the drum, and it was okay. Wheel cylinders and springs, hardware, all okay. I estimated the ticket. It came out to about $150 to fix the car. I went to the new service manager and handed him the estimate. He went and looked at the car. He didn't even take 30 seconds, and he said he needed to add new wheel cylinders, hardware kit, and 2 drums to the estimate. I told him all the parts he wanted to replace were okay. He said, "Do it." I just shrugged my shoulders and walked away. He went back to the service desk. I walked into a completely crowded waiting area, stood in the middle of the room, and proceeded to tell everyone in the room what the new service manager wanted me to do. I turned around and went to go get my truck to load my toolbox and leave. The service manager tried to stop me from loading my box on my truck. At the time, about 5 customers came out and helped me lift the box into the truck, and then started screaming at the service manager. They all wanted their cars back together and taken off the lifts. It got so bad one customer called the cops, and the service manager called the owner. The cops and the owner showed up. I was putting the girl's wheel back on. The owner came over to talk to me, and I told him what had happened and what I did. The owner went over to the service manager, who was surrounded by all the teed-off customers, and fired him. I decided at that point I was still going to quit because the owner was just acting. He told the service manager to do it, obviously. At that point, a few other techies were packing their crap up too. As I was walking up to my truck to leave, the girl walked up to me and thanked me. She asked if I knew another shop that could fix her car, and I decided I would fix it myself. So we went over to the parts store, got the parts, went to my house, and redid the brakes. Not to make this whole story even longer, this was in 1989 and we've been married for 24 years now. The service manager couldn't get a job at any shop around. I still see him every once in a while, gathering up the grocery carts at H-E-B. I managed to find a telemarketing job as one of my first jobs. It sucked and we were treated like animals, but it was close enough that I could walk there from home. I only intended to stay long enough to afford a car. One day, I realized that I had reached my set amount of dollars for a car purchase. As a joke, I strayed as far from the sales pitch as possible. I changed my greetings to things like, "Hey," or "Sup." I impersonated celebrity voices. People stopped working around me. They just listened in shock. But it also completely backfired. It was my highest day of sales ever. I sold 10 times my average. The pit boss was bewildered, which is why I wasn't fired right away. He listened in on my calls that day. He begged me to stay, but I was out. I used to work for a telecommunications company. My mum was very sick over the last 3 months of her life, so I had to go home most weekends to see her. It's a 6-hour journey to get from where I worked to the town where I'm from. When her birthday came around, I requested a couple of days off that I'd saved for this specific occasion. Yet the days off were denied because we were approaching a busy time of the year for sales. At this point, I hadn't mentioned what was happening at home because, well, I was always taught you keep your work and personal lives separate. But I said to my boss, who at the time I saw as a pretty compassionate person. She never took any issue when I got sick or was late for whatever reason. But when I told her, she just looked at me point blank and said, "I don't want to hear this." After that meeting, I went back to my desk and sat there for about 20 minutes thinking of a solution. The solution was to get my things and just leave. I said goodbye to my friends and on my way out, flipped my boss off and just walked out. I went straight to my car and drove back to my hometown that night. It was the best decision I ever made. I got to spend all my time with my mum before she went. We even got to go on vacation and spend one last week away together because I had time to do so. I'll never, ever regret walking out that day. Not exactly hilarious, but I had a good chuckle to myself on that drive home. The look on my boss's face will never leave me. It was sweet. I worked as a mechanic at Pep Boys several years ago. While I worked there, some of us discovered that if the drainage pipe in the shop were pressurized, the toilet would shoot water out of the bowl. The service manager at my store was a piece of crap. The day that I quit, I waited until he went into the bathroom to take a dump. I filled up a cheater, a device used to seat a tire onto a wheel, and released about 200 psi all at once into the drainage pipe. The toilet fricking exploded, the manager screamed, and then comes storming out of the bathroom covered in his own crap. It's the middle of the lunch rush at the restaurant. It's a gorgeous day, but the porch is closed, so myself and this poor middle-aged waitress are taking everyone who's expected to sit outside into our room. We're providing crap service because there's usually 5 servers for this many people, not 2. I asked the manager if she wouldn't mind calling people in to open up the porch, which is where all of these people are expected to sit. She goes off on me. "Are you fricking kidding me?" I exclaim. "You just swore at a manager. You're fired." I was going back to college in 2 weeks, so I didn't really give a frick. The thing is, she had to cash me out first, so for those 10 minutes I quietly cussed her out in front of everyone until she started screaming her head off in the middle of the restaurant. She was fired a couple of weeks later.
What is your best met the high school jerk/bully as an adult story? I own my own gym and have for a few years now. I received a message one day from a familiar-looking name on the business's Facebook page from a woman asking to come try us out. We set it up, she comes in for an introduction. She's a very, very large and out-of-shape woman at this point. After about 5 minutes of working with her, it hits me that this lady used to be about half her current size and was an absolute bee back in her heyday. I decided not to bring it up to her as she appeared to be struggling in life and came to us in a time of need, and I took it, as I do with all of my clients, as a cry for help. Not to mention, I'm a grown man now, and that seemed pretty silly and insignificant in life today. Months later, during one of the classes, I noticed her struggling real hard, so I go over to offer some encouragement. As I lean down to say something to her, I notice she's crying faintly to herself. She looks up at me and quietly says, "Sorry for how nasty I was to you years ago, and thank you for doing this for me." Turns out an old mutual friend told her about my place and she recognized me as the owner and came to me on purpose. No, not a story of revenge or retribution, but she reached out to someone she was terrible to, and today, she's repurposed, and I find it to be quite inspiring. Not quite the same, but about 10 years ago, I caught my dad screaming at the TV. "This freaking jerk got his own show! He was such a piece of crap when we were kids. He would beat you up for your lunch money, push you for no good reason, take your toys, and based on the way he acts now, it doesn't seem like he grew up much." He was talking about Paul Toodles Sr. from American Choppers. We met at a bar where a large number of our high school class happened to be. He described me as his arch enemy. I realized I hadn't even thought about him in 10 years. She got the whole middle school through junior high to call me gay. I was not gay. She is. She came out of the closet right after high school. I was a jerk in high school. Then I went through the karma-mandated fat phase. Made a guy's day when he saw me at work. I went from pretty dang fine in high school to man the harpoons. I'm also nicer. He came in and said, "Wow, the fanciful unicorn?" And I said, "Yep, does this make it feel better?" and spread out my arms. He responded, "Heck yeah, you were a jerk." I said sorry. I was pretty immature. And then we talked like normal adults. Moved to a new school in 7th grade and was doing fine. Making friends, good grades. Then somehow ran afoul of this bigger kid. He'd been held back a few times. Typical bully, pushed little kids into lockers, loved to torment girls, and ran with a pack of acolytes who adored and aped him. In Texas at the time, if a kid didn't like you, he, quote, called you out, challenged you to a fight after school. Well, Zed calls me out one day because I was a, quote, queer from New York. Clueless me, moved there from said New York where people are civilized, I said, sure, okay. A few days later, in front of his acolytes and a small group of my friends, he proceeds to beat the crap out of me. It was 7th grade, so the damage wasn't excessive, mostly to my pride. Spent the rest of middle school known as one of the guys Zed beat the crap out of. Fast forward about 7 years, home from college and going to the grocery store for mom. Who should I see bagging my goodies but Zed? Taking a look at him, I see a horrible scar running from the top of his head down around the back of his skull and neck and under his shirt. His face lights up when he sees me, and he says, in slightly slurred speech, "Hey, didn't we go to school together? We're friends from school, right?" He walks with me out to the parking lot, and as we walk, I learn that he had been hit by a car in high school while biking home one day. Accident required a half dozen surgeries, and it left Zed mentally impaired and a completely different person. He put my stuff in the car, shook my hand for a good 30 seconds, and kept asking me to, quote, come back and see me sometime. I had hated few people in my life to that point, and no one more than him. Almost cried driving home. I felt so bad for him and disgusted with myself for my previous hatred. I ran into somebody in high school that I used to pick on regularly when we were in 1st or 2nd grade. We recognized each other, and I walked up to him. We exchanged a few words, since I hadn't seen him in close to 10 years, and then didn't talk again. But right before we parted ways, I apologized for the way I treated him as a child. I couldn't stress how sorry I was for being a piece of crap to him for no other reason than I felt like it. I still occasionally think about him and where he's at in life. I work in a jail. I've seen the quote, popular kids on the other side of the bars. I ran into my high school bully at a gay bar a few years back. He was my bottom that night. One of mine was this kid named Patrick. One incident led to 2 of my ribs being broken when he jumped on my chest with his knees. Another resulted in a broken eye socket after being kicked in the face by him and 2 of his friends. Eventually, I moved in with my father and didn't see any of my old bullies again, except for a few. Some have been relatively nice, and some are jerks. During high school, I took some martial arts classes, Taekwondo. I was always a larger kid, but too timid to fight back, but martial arts helped me to overcome that. Fast forward to a year or 2 after high school, and I go over to visit my mother. She had moved in with a real jerk who was into God knows what. And guess who's there? Patrick. He's now almost a foot shorter than me, skinny as a middle school girl, and was undoubtedly on meth. I later found out he also did heroin and a myriad of other drugs. We end up talking, and I tell him about how I have sinus trouble because of the beating I got from him and his friends. He laughed. I looked around at my younger brother, who had got very skinny from not eating, and sister, the environment they were in, and right then I made a decision. I turned to my mother and said, I don't give a crap if this is the kind of people you want to be around, indicating the piece of crap next to me, but we are leaving. So I piled my siblings in my car and brought them home with me. They shortly moved in with my father officially and have been much better off since. Patrick made a comment about me, quote, disrespecting him and my mother, and I told him he had no respect for himself, obviously, so who is he to talk like that? He went to hit me and I just stared at him. He dropped his fist quick after I stared him down for what felt like an hour. TLDR, met middle school bully, he's a meth head, was living with my mother, took my siblings and left after verbally sparring with him. Feels good, man. Edit. Wow, this got a lot more karma than I thought. Didn't have time to write this up earlier, but to clear a few things up, he didn't bang my mother. I don't think. He was basically just there all the time like drug addicts are wont to do. My mother was living, and screwing, her boyfriend at the time, whose house it actually was. And the thought of snapping him like a twig did occur to me, but that paled in comparison to what he was doing to himself. If he didn't clean his ways up by now, he's likely dead or in prison. Beating the crap out of him wouldn't have made me feel any better. Plus, it's a lot easier on the knuckles. When I was a kid, I was fat. I used to get picked on all the time by this kid at church named Rusty. He was about 5 years older than me, and every couple of weeks, he would beat me up. I moved away when I was about 14, and thankfully, I didn't have to deal with him anymore. When I went to college, I decided to get my act together and get healthy. To that end, I started taking mixed martial arts. I did it for about 2 years and lost about 40 pounds. When I graduated, I moved back to where I was from and started looking for a new MMA gym. I went to the most reputable one, and who should be there but Rusty? It sounds too good to be true, but I swear to God it happened. He hadn't changed a bit. The first thing he said to me was, "Finally trying to learn to defend yourself, huh?" I had called ahead, and the instructor knew my deal and had arranged for me to come watch. I left my gear in the car. At the end of class, they do free rolling, jiu-jitsu sparring. Rusty comes up to me, having no knowledge that I am the least bit experienced, and starts begging the instructor to let him spar me, so he can, quote, show me the ropes. After all, he's been in MMA for 3 months now, and he never misses a UFC pay-per-view. I went outside and changed. Long story short, we sparred and I choked him out 3 times. Afterwards, I signed up for classes, he grabbed his bag, left, and never came back. This is my favorite story out of everything that has happened in my life thus far. I'm the only person I know that got to beat up my childhood bully as an adult. I was in need for an accountant job, so I searched several websites of businesses. I came across a very worthy company, so I wanted to apply. While I was filling out the form, I looked around the website some more and saw the name of the head chief of the company. I was depressed for the rest of the day. My high school bully who bullied me every day is now the head chief of his own freaking business. I'm an accountant. It doesn't always work out. This one is a classic. This girl used to torment me all through high school and middle school. Really went out of her way to tear me down. Whenever we had a class together, she would make her extreme dislike for me apparent, and, of course, other kids followed. I couldn't open my mouth without some kind of ridicule. Of course I was miserable, and my dad would try to cheer me up. Don't worry, kiddo. One day, she'll be working at a McDonald's and serving you fries. He actually referred to her as McDonald's for years. A couple years after graduating high school, I went to a Hardee's with my dad, and there was McDonald's behind the counter. I go out to place my order, and before I finish, she says, "You don't remember me, do you?" "Oh, I remember you." "Oh, so, would you like fries with that?" "Why, yes. Yes, I would." Way to go, Dad. Called it 9 years in advance. I had an evil 5th grade teacher who made my life terrible for a year. She even instigated a quote, "pick on Stoops day." I saw her at the bar where my friend worked. The day before this, we had invented a shot that tastes like urinal cake smell, Captain Morgan's Lime Bite mixed with Miller High Life. I bought my old teacher and her friends around from across the bar. I made eye contact and raised my shot of Wild Turkey. They gave me a curious look, but took the urinal cake shots nonetheless. My old teacher proceeded to throw up on the bar and get 86th from one of the only bars in town. Screw you, Mrs. Freeman! My sister has since become really good friends with her childhood tormentors. The sad part to me is that the reason she was able to patch things up was that she was a very late bloomer and ended up the kind of popular person they wanted to be friends with. I guess she kind of sold out and became friends with them. How on earth the topic never comes up amongst them, I do not know. Maybe it's her long-term plan to enact revenge, gain trust, destroy them, preferably by dumping pig's blood on their heads at a formal event of some kind. My dad is a very large man. We're talking 6'7", 300 pounds big. He would always tell me this story to cheer me up when girls would be jerks to me. He was pretty chubby in high school, so he played football and was good at it, but just really loved playing basketball. So his freshman year, he tried out for the team and didn't make it. The coach, who was a history teacher at the school, stated his weight as an issue. Fair enough. He worked hard to lose some weight over the summer, blah blah blah. Enter sophomore year. Ends up having the coach as his history teacher. Great, he thinks. He could be a good student and hopefully get on the team. Wrong. This adult man decided to call my father names related to his weight and harass him in front of the class. Not cool, but my dad was too proud and never said anything. Ended up making varsity his sophomore year because of a coaching change. Fast forward about 5 years. My dad was working as a bouncer at a bar in a nearby town to where he went to school. It was a regular night when who walks in? Jerk history teacher. Perfect. He thinks, I'll let it go, be professional, until he recognizes my dad as, quote, the chubby kid who was a coward. My dad looks at him and says, "Sir, I think you've had too much to drink. It's time for you to go home." The coach is saying, No, I'm fine, etc., etc. My dad grabs him by the shirt and says, "No, it's time for you to step outside. You've had too much to drink." The coach decides to swing at my dad, and that's when he loses it. He states, "This is for all the kids you called fat, you piece of crap," and proceeds to beat the tar out of him. A long story, I know, but my favorite by far. My dad and his old bouncer friends always tell it when they got together, too. Ah, revenge. Content warning, this one's pretty violent. My dad did something similar. He grew up as a poorish farm boy in Ireland. All he ever wanted to do was sing in the church Christmas Day show. He bought himself a guitar and taught himself to play, but his headmaster at school wouldn't let him, or any of the family for that matter, perform in it. Fast forward about 30 years, we are back in Ireland for my grandfather's funeral, and we walk into my cousin's pub, and sitting at the bar is this old man. I had never seen my dad so angry before in my life. His face was purple with anger at the sight of this guy. He decked this old man so hard he knocked him off his bar stool and onto his back. My dad crouched down inches from his face and said, "Get out before I punch you for every boy you laid eyes on." This old man looked like he was going to crap himself and ran out of there as fast as he could. I was mortified and felt awful for this old man until my dad told me what this man was doing. He was touching the boys from school. He would take his pics and basically cycle through them as he saw fit. The boys not being touched didn't get away easy either. They were hit with a shillelagh until they bled. My dad hated this man and says that had he found him when he was a drinking man, he may have killed him. TLDR, my dad decked an old man for kitty diddling his friends. This is kind of morbid. In the 6th grade, I was friends with this kid. I remember one day telling him about an episode of Rescue 911 that I saw, where a guy was driving an ATV in a field and didn't see that there was a barbed wire. Fast forward a year, and this kid started to make really mean comments about me. He would make fun of my appearance and how my family had no money in front of everyone. I am from an immigrant family, and he would always tell me to go back to my country. Middle school was really tough on me because of kids like him, but held back from fighting him because I knew nothing good would come from it. Fast forward to the summer after high school graduation, that kid was driving an ATV in a field, didn't see the barbed wire, and was decapitated. Weird that 7 years prior, I had described to my future tormentor exactly how he will die. I've got 2. I was picked on a lot. About 10 years ago, I got a temporary job at Kroger. It was just stocking shelves, and I had another restaurant job lined up, but needed something for about 2 months while I went through a lengthy hiring process there. Spoiler, I wound up getting an even better job elsewhere and wound up never taking that. So, I go to get my check on my first payday at Kroger and find out the manager at the front is one of the guys who used to bully the crap out of me in high school. He made small talk for a minute. "Hey, how you been? Good to see you." He clearly remembered. Once everyone walked away, he leaned in and said, "Hey, deprecated zero, I'm really sorry for all the crap I did to you in school. I was a stupid jerk kid." I smiled, held out my hand, thanked him, and told him it's all in the past. That was really cool. The other is less cool but hilarious to me. This girl was, quote, the prom queen, basically. The stereotypical mean girl dating the football player. My opinion of her was always that she was just spoiled, worthless, and dumb. I don't usually take joy in other people's misfortune, but I felt schadenfreude in unparalleled amounts the day I walked into Buffalo Wild Wings and saw her standing behind the counter. This is maybe 10 years out of high school. She looks exactly the same. Put on some weight maybe, but hair still done the same. She still looks like she got Effie Trinket to do her makeup, so on. You could tell at a glance that she's never mentally moved past 8th grade. I asked how she'd been, tried to politely talk to her because, hey, I want people to do well. She was a jerk. Was like, "Ew, you're deprecated zero." I just raised my eyebrows at her and let it go. Long story short, her boss was my roommate. I asked him about her. Single mother, just got kicked out of her mom's house. He just hired her like 2 weeks earlier. He confronted her about talking down to customers and wound up firing her. Felt like justice. I lucked out and didn't really garner any enemies while in middle school and high school. Mostly because I was the poor kid at a snobby private school in Nashville, Tennessee, until I moved in 9th grade and nobody would talk to me. There was this one really obnoxious boy in one of my classes in 7th grade though. Treated everyone like handmaids, but the parents had money, so nothing was ever really done about it. Ran across his Facebook page the other day. His parents just bought him his second Lamborghini because he wrecked the first one. I try not to hold animosity towards anyone, but I hope somebody keys his car. I was working in a video rental store in Houston, circa 1989, about 2 years after I graduated high school. In comes a girl that had always been awful to me from 10th grade to graduation. She would cross a room just to say something mean, and I had no history with this girl at all. I had never actually said a word to her. All our exchanges were just her saying something mean to me. I didn't even know her last name. I must have reminded her of someone. She comes into the store and sheepishly said that she wanted 3 dirty movies. She didn't seem to remember me. She said her best friend was getting married and she wanted some dirty movies for the bachelorette party. The shop had a small adult room that you had to access by coming behind the counter, but she didn't want to go in there. She asked me to select 3 films. She was squirming with embarrassment as I tried to find out what she was, quote, into, and kind of acted like I thought the films were for her and her alone. She said, "Just grab 3 good ones, I don't care." So I selected 3, all lesbian adult films, and she slunk out with them. I would have loved to see the look on their faces when they popped those tapes in. She returned them through the night drop so she wouldn't have to look anyone in the eye when she brought them back. She rented on her parents' account. I sent a notice through the mail to her parents that, quote, Mona's three-way slit party had been returned damaged and they owed us $30. Met a kid that was an absolute brute in high school. Thought he was tough stuff. I think I only went face-to-face with him once over some dumb crap about him threatening a friend of mine. No real fight ever came from it, but he was definitely an enemy. Met him randomly in an airport halfway across the country maybe 4 years after high school. He was the nicest guy. The Marines beat the stupid right out of him. I was playing poker in Atlantic City about 7 years ago, and one of the guys that bullied me, Chad, sat at my table. There's no way he recognized me. I was actually playing on a no-limit hold'em table while waiting for a seat to open in a two-way high-low game. Anyway, I stayed at the NLHE table just to take his money. I played probably 95% of the pots he was in. He was pretty drunk and wasn't very good. I got close to $600 off of him in a little over an hour before he decided to quit. I have no idea what he does for a living, but I am 100% sure he is a big loser when he plays cards.
What was your most awesome "don't F with me" moment? I will gladly start. One day, I was out fishing at a local pond with a few girls that I went to school with. We had gotten close because of Honours Society, and yes, they're attractive. We catch a few bass and channel catfish and decide it's time to head home before dusk sets tonight. Mind you, there's about a 150 to 200 yard path from the parking lot to the actual pond, so we started heading down said path. As we get about halfway down, we see two local thugs who have dropped out of high school and are always around to cause trouble in our town. Since I'm carrying all of the tackle for non-fishermen, rods, lures, tackle box, etc., I'm also trailing the three girls. As we got closer to the thugs, I hear one of them yelling bullcrap like, "Damn, mummy, look at that butt!" and "Crap, I'd screw every single one of you," right in front of the girls. Next, the guy in front turns around and grabs one of my friend's butts and slaps her right in the chest. This teed me off more than anything, and I stupidly yell, "Hey, frick butts, don't even frickin' look at them." I admit I'm a little hot-tempered and probably could have handled the situation much better, but frick it, I was in the heat of the moment. The two guys start walking over to me, obviously ready to beat my butt. With quick thinking, I dropped my tackle and flipped out my 4-inch Smith & Wesson knife from my pocket, and to put the icing on the cake, I pull out my car bar that I use for filleting. After this, the story kind of winds down. The dudes were silent after that, took a very wide path around us, and we were on our way. Needless to say, that was my great "don't frick with me" moment. To clarify to those asking, I did not get laid. However, I did get a free dinner out of it. Well, that could have gone one of two ways, and I for one am very happy that those guys just chose to walk away. But nonetheless, well done, Knifey McFisherman. My friend's dad is a truck driver, and he used to pick up hitchhikers all the time. One time he picked two of them up, and they started on the journey to wherever they were going. After an hour, one decides he's going to try and jack the truck, and pulls out a knife. Well, my friend's dad, being super cool and steely, floors it and says, "You're gonna put that knife away, or I'm gonna kill us all," and steers directly toward the concrete dividers that were splitting the highway up ahead. The would-be truck jackers put away the knife and sit quietly for the rest of the ride, and he still drops them off at their destination. That's a bad motherfricker right there. I think you mean a bad butt mother trucker. He must have had a mustache to store his extra testicle in. I was living with a middle-aged woman. Since I'm middle-aged as well, this was a fairly decent arrangement. Her daughter was living with us as well, 17 years old and hell on wheels. From what I understand, one of her former boyfriends became upset with her because she had a new boyfriend. He was going to come to my home and beat the crap out of her under my roof. He said that if I got in his way, he was going to beat my butt as well. A friend of hers caught wind of what was happening and called her mother. She called me. The boy showed up with an audience. I greeted them just by poking my head out of the door and telling them to get the frick off my property. The butthole gets out of the vehicle. I open the door, and he can see that I'm packing a .45 in my shoulder rig. I also have an .870 by the door. I hear a forlorn, "Hi, John," to me, from his friend that came along to witness him beating my butt. I repeat my demand that the man remove himself from my property, and he complied. It could have been the gun, then again it could have been the shovel leaning against my truck, and the fact that no one would come looking for him if he disappeared that far from town. My great-grandfather was a CB in World War II. Somewhere along the way, he got his hands on a frag grenade. When he came home, he unscrewed the pin fuse mechanism, dumped out the black powder that makes the boom boom, and put the fuse back on so it looked like a regular grenade. He kept it on his bedstand for the rest of his life. Apparently, this was also when someone broke into his house, he could calmly walk out with the grenade, pull the pin, and threaten to blow everyone to heck and back if they didn't kindly replace anything they'd taken and exit his property. I work as an EMT, and one time we had a bloodbath of a call. Old lady had damn near scalped herself in a fall, and it was quite messy. Trying to keep her calm to keep the bandages on her freely flowing head. After the call, I was covered from the front down, in my uniform, and took off the top layer to reveal my undershirt, which was also covered in blood. Too late in the day, and not caring, I was hopping in the back of the rig and heading back to base to change. My apartment was a mile from the base, so I headed there instead. As we pull up, I hear voices yelling and hop out in my now blood-drenched clothes. I turn around the corner and see 3 guys grabbing and pulling one of my neighbors, an elderly woman who doesn't speak much English. So I quickly take stock of the situation and grab a tire iron from the side of the rig, which was slightly out of view. I take a few steps and yell, "Leave her alone or you're going to pay," while my partner calls for PD backup. They turn around just as some of the outside lights come on and reveal me, a 5'10" skinny guy, covered in blood with tactical pants on, with a tire iron. Their faces were priceless. Suddenly one of them books, and the other says to the last guy there, "Frick it, I'm not dealing with that dude," and follows his friend. I help the lady and then realize what a scary sight I was. Some dude, covered in blood with a tire iron, coming out from around the corner into the light and angry. She ended up being fine, and I changed rather quickly after that. The police came and got what little info they could, and we were all on our way. But gosh darn, I felt like a superhero. In conclusion, covered in blood, I scared off 3 thugs who wanted to beat an old Russian lady with a tire iron and good lighting. Now, this I can get behind. Theatricality and costume over violence any day. Batman would be proud of you, sir. Long story short, my passport got stolen and my only way back home was a train from Oakland, California, back to Canada. So I was sitting at the train station for like 2 hours and decided to go for a walk around that part of Oakland, across from where the Raiders and A's play. Being naive and from Canada, I had no idea what this meant. It took me less than 10 minutes to realize that I'd made a horrible decision. A car started driving around the block I was walking down. I had a suitcase and a backpack and a large bag. It was a long trip. After the 3rd time being circled around, I decided to walk back, and quickly. That worked well until I had to cross the parking lot, where this car pulled in as well. Now, being from Canada, all of a sudden the thought of these scary stories of gang shootings and muggings from the American news got me scared. I try not to profile people, but the 3 guys who got out of the car are what we see as the typical gangsters. Pants to ankles, gold chains, gold teeth, driving an old Cadillac. The driver steps in front of my walking path because I've been trying to avoid eye contact. He stops me and goes, "Yo man, you not from here," and laughs. "What you got in there? Hey, I should check it out." His 2 friends are leaning over the car, and one pulls a bat out of the car and places it on the roof. This is where my instincts kick in, and I lose control of any real thinking. So I start yelling in the most aggressive way possible. "I got my fricking crap, that's what I got. I'm from Surrey fricking BC, and if you think pulling out a bat means you fricking scare me, you think twice. You better have something more than that to get at me. I step over smackheads on my way to work every morning, and I stabbed a guy for pushing me in a bus line. So if you want to start something, fricking start it." Now, obviously, I've never stabbed anyone, and I'm from Surrey, and I do step over smackheads on my way to work, but I don't know where any of this came from. By all physical appearances, I'm a bit of a dork, and I'm gay, so I have no idea where any of this came from, but my heart was racing, and this is what came out. So I stood there for a few seconds, breathing heavily, fists clenched, posed in the same stupid-looking come-at-me-bro pose, like I was ready to battle a lion. The guy looks at his other friends and then goes, "My bad, man," and then gets back in the car and they leave. About a minute after they left, I actually had to sit down because my legs would not work, I was so scared. So that's how I almost died. I don't actually think this would or could ever happen again in the same situation. I have almost never raised my voice in my life. But I really didn't want to die. Also, after the gong show of losing your passport in a foreign country and having to take a train home, your emotions get the best of you. I've had a similar moment. At the time, I was 23 and super goth. We're talking 8-inch platform boots, on top of being 6'1", skin-tight rubber pants, makeup, shaved off and drawn on eyebrows, girls' tank top, the works. So I was very androgynous. On my way home, in the ghetto, on a bus full of inner-city high school kids just out of school, and this tough guy thug is giving me the hairy eyeball the whole ride. I get off at my stop and the kid follows me. He couldn't have been more than 16, but he thinks he's hard. He starts harnessing me, threatening to beat my queer butt if I don't give him my wallet. I turn calmly around to face him and I say, "Look, kid, I'm 23 and I've been dressing like this since I was 15. You think this would be my first fight? Why don't you walk the frick away before you have to explain to your friends how you got yourself beat by a queer?" I then turned my back on him and walked back home while he stood there in silence. It's kind of a cliche line, but damn if it doesn't work. Two guys at a bar, one sitting next to me and the other across, start fricking with me for no apparent reason. They were clearly on the sauce. The fact that I ordered the crappy bar pizza is a testament to the fact that I was nearing that point too. At the point the waitress came by and dropped my pizza off, the guy across from me is basically challenging me to walk outside. At that moment, the sad excuse of a D-bag next to me makes a grab at my pizza. Through some amazing drunken luck, I see this out of the corner of my eye, launch my arm out, and backslap the crap out of this guy's arm. They must have thought I knew martial arts because they didn't say a word after this and got up to leave. Don't mess with my pizza. How do we have these moments of supreme physical coordination when we've had a fair bit to drink? I once landed a chip in my friend's wine glass from across a big room after a medically inadvisable amount of liquor, and I could never do that sober. Same probably goes for Karate McBar Pizza. Mine was more of a don't F with me because my brother is bat crap crazy moment. I have an older gay brother. It was pretty well known that he was gay in high school, but nobody ever flat out asked me about it. One day, two guys from the football team, both juniors, are giving me a hard time. Suddenly, brother walks over and says, "Hey, leave him alone. This isn't a request." One guy replies, "Shut up, queer. What are you gonna do?" My brother's answer still sticks with me to this day. See, you should think about that. I've been a queer about as long as I can remember, which means I got into fights every day. So I know I can fight. How about you? Can you actually fight? Or do you just try to scare people? Because you don't scare me. I've F'd guys bigger than both of you. Again, leave my brother alone. F you, queer. You're not my type. I like men. At this point, a little crowd had gathered and they began to laugh at my brother's last comment. The two guys scowled, huffed, and walked away. My brother looked at me, smiled, and said, "Sorry if that was awkward." I used to get in fights a lot, but I think the best one was at a bar with my buddy watching baseball games. My buddy loves the Red Sox and doesn't drink, and I think baseball is stupid, but I love drinking, so we reached a kind of compromise. Anyway, while my friend Scott is chatting up this girl next to him about the Sox or whatever, these two guys next to us in Yankees jerseys are becoming more and more belligerent, yelling, throwing crap at the TV, and just generally being buttheads. Now, I know enough about baseball to know Boston and New York hate each other. Hell, I'm originally from Philadelphia, we hate everyone. But I didn't think these two were going to be much trouble aside from being loud. Then, for whatever reason, one of the big New Yorkers guys decides to dump a full beer on this Red Sox chick my friend was talking to. At this point, my entirely sober friend said something along the lines of, "Hey dude, what the frick?" This dude turned to my buddy, reeled drunkenly for a moment, and then leaned way back and made that huge hocking a loogie sound, and right as he leaned in to spit, I swung at him, forgetting I still had a full beer mug in my hand. According to my friend and his lady friend, the spit totally came all the way out of his mouth, hit the mug, and then went back into his face when the mug hit him. It was wicked awesome. Now mind you, I'm completely hammered, but as far as New York bros were concerned, I came out of freaking nowhere like an inebriated Batman, because at the time I was sitting at a table behind the whole group. Wingmanning is a subtle art, so this guy hits the floor bloody and sputtering. His other New York bro looks at me, mouth agape, and takes 2 steps back. And then I got jumped by the bouncers and was dragged out of the bar yelling, "Frick New York!" the entire way because I was too drunk to think of a good badass line. Not quite as bad as most of these stories, but I've got kind of a good one. Just to provide a bit of context, I'm a super skinny, wimpy, white male, and a really nice guy who you'd never expect to lash out at someone. Back in high school, there was this kid who liked to mooch off everyone else's lunch, just because he'd never bought or packed his own. You know, the whole, "I'm really poor, so you should definitely give me all your food. I need it more than you" routine. He wasn't really, he just liked to take our food because he could. Every now and again, I'd give him half a sandwich or something, because like I said, I enjoy being a nice person. But one day, I just snapped. He grabbed my whole lunch bag from right in front of me without even asking for anything, and before I even started to eat my own food. In an instant, I dove across the table, grabbed him by his shirt, pulled him completely over to my side, and growled, "Give me my fricking lunch back, butthole," in his face. I got it, and it was delicious. I'd call this a badass moment of mine because I'd never ever act out like that. I'm usually pretty submissive and soft about things. But gosh darn it, I was excited for my little Debbie's and ham sandwich, and I wasn't going to let some butthole take them from me. All of my friends were totally shocked too. They had no idea I was even capable of sticking up for myself like that. Guess that's one way to keep people from messing with you. Among many of my security jobs, I've worked loss prevention for 2 major retailers. For those wondering, loss prevention is essentially catching shoplifters. Eventually, you just kinda know who to watch and who not to. One day, my partner, a female, and I started to watch this guy. Early 20s, overly muscled and spray-tanned, with a Guido Jersey Shore haircut and a muscle shirt. He is, of course, looking at other muscle shirts in the store. We see him select 5 shirts, go into the fitting room. Long story short, we know that he steals 8 of those shirts eventually, and me and my co-workers are with him acting as an arguing couple the whole time. He eventually goes to leave the store, which is when we can stop him. So we get in front of him at the doors, identify ourselves, and ask him to come with us. Now, I normally slouch a lot, but I'm 6'4". So the kid gets in my face, saying he didn't do anything, and if I don't move, he's gonna kick my butt. So all I did was stare at him and say, "Make a decision about what you're gonna do, and we'll go from there." Totally calm, with a straight face. He kinda blinked and got a weird look in his eye and asked me, "What?" So I repeated myself. I said, "Make a decision about what you're gonna do, and we'll go from there." He kinda sat there for a few seconds and leaned back a bit and started catcalling my female co-worker instead. At that point, I snapped my fingers and told him to pay attention to me. After that, we placed him in handcuffs and led him to the office for processing. Since then, I've used that line multiple times at other LP, security jobs, and even at bars. The only time anyone has ever done anything after that was a patient from a mental hospital I worked at who was schizophrenic, and at that point, it didn't matter what I said. 60% of the time, it works every time. I too have a security job story. It was getting late, the store is about to close, Lord & Taylor, when I see a guy who doesn't look like he'd be buying the types of clothes that are sold there. He walks in and starts browsing the dress shirt section. Me and my fellow co-workers see him pick up about 10 shirts and proceed to walk into the dressing room with them. Now, you think that a smart thief may hide 1, 2, or maybe 3 in their pants if they're super ballsy. No, this man decides to stuff 10 dress shirts down into his pants, making him look like he has similar-sized quads as Ronnie Coleman himself. At this point, I stop him right away, say that we know he's trying to steal all the shirts and ask him kindly to put them back. This is when things start heating up. The man says he has a deadly transmitted disease, pulls out a syringe and says that anyone that tries to get in his way is gonna get stuck. I obviously don't want any part of this, so I back up and was going to let him go. Normal protocol is that you're not allowed to touch a customer inside the store, even if you do know they're stealing. This is when I hear clothes dropping on the floor and the sounds of metal hangers rattling. My coworker decided that 10 shirts was not leaving the store and he was going to stop this man. Out of left field, I see a metal bar come slamming into this man with the force of 100 men. He gets knocked unconscious, cops are called, the man gets arrested, and all was made right in the world. I wasn't really bad, but my coworker surely was. If your coworker did that to stop him from sticking someone with a needle, then he's pretty cool. If he did it to prevent a theft, then he's a fricking moron. I'm inclined to agree with that final commenter. I love a good defeat the bad guy story, but endangering yourself and your retail coworker like that to save some shirts isn't worth it. I was in downtown Houston skating around with some friends when I told them I had to stop and pee. So I walked into a narrow alley and started peeing. I didn't see these 2 girls just smoking cigarettes, staring at my dong. So I looked at them and smiled. Right as I finished up, a couple of D-bags came up and just started talking crap to them. Typical wanna frick you, got a pretty mouth, dumb craps. So I started to walk over and break that crap up when a guy looks at me and says, "What the frick do you think you're gonna do, B-word?" So I just started talking in a low voice in German, just repeating lyrics from Rammstein, making it sound like a threatening sentence instead of a song. Then they freaked out because I'm a tall, fairly muscular motherfricker. They left and the girls said thanks and asked me what I said, and I told them, I don't know, and I left. I was with some guys and we were all drunk. We walked out of a bad greasy spoon at 3 a.m. and ran into some guys walking into the restaurant, also drunk. I was the last in my group and I accidentally rubbed shoulders with the first guy in that group. Immediately, he starts talking crap, but I just ignore him and keep walking to the parking lot. I'm about halfway to my car when he says something that particularly offends me, because it was targeted at one of the girls with us. I turn around and seconds later, we're in the middle of a blank spot in the parking lot with our friends off to the sides. Eye to eye, he finally realizes that I'm a pretty big guy. We have a tense silence for a few seconds, then under my breath I quietly say, "You're gonna say, frick this guy, he ain't worth it. You're gonna turn around, walk away, and rejoin your friends. And you're gonna do that because if you don't, you won't need to eat, because I'm gonna feed you your frickin' shoes." About 5 seconds passed before he said, "Oh, frick this guy, he ain't worth it," and rejoined his friends. Probably more of a D-bag thing than a badass thing, but oh well. I used to work at Starbucks in the city where a lot of trust fund kids like to hang out and act homeless. There was always a group of them who stood out the front of the store, and that was next to Starbucks, yelling at people and usually playing hacky sack with each other. They made it a habit of yelling at anyone who walked through their game, threatening them. Bunch of bullcrap. I was going to my shift one day, and I was in a rotten mood. There they were, playing that game in the middle of the sidewalk, blocking everyone. I walked right through them, interrupted the game, and they started to call me out. I kept walking until I felt the hacky sack hit me in the back. I picked it up and threw it on the roof of the Starbucks and walked into work. I work at a bar as a bouncer. I don't look like the biggest guy, but I do strength training regularly. I deal with buttholes on a nightly basis. One in particular caught my eye when he was literally screaming at his girlfriend inside my bar. I walked up to him and let him know that if he did that again, he would be picking garbage from his teeth. Him being drunk, he didn't listen, and as I'm clearing out the bar at bar close, I see him again across the bar near the front door, near the trash can filled with random bar crap and bottles. He yells at her again, reaches back and slaps her. She goes to the floor. I crushed a par through the patrons and he didn't see me coming. One punch KO'd him and he landed headfirst in the trash can. I then proceeded to put the rest of him in it, picked his girlfriend up off the floor and contacted the police. They laughed upon arriving at him still being in the trash can.
Military personnel of Reddit. What's the best, weirdest, or funniest punishment you've seen handed down by a superior? USMC boot. One kid on Firewatch failed to notice the DI coming on deck, which means you immediately salute and report your post. So the DI ran up to the rifle rack, smacked it, and yelled, "Bam! You're dead." He tried to respond, but was cut off by the DI. "You're a ghost now. You can't talk. Go act like a ghost." Then the kid had to wander around the squad bay for the rest of his 2-hour Firewatch acting like a ghost, and he took that responsibility with stride. Plenty of ridiculous, "Ooh, I'm a ghost" noises and screwing with people's racks. We were all laughing our butts off for the next hour till our senior got mad. Here's another one that happened to me. An SDI from the squad bay above us told us that whenever he comes on deck and we call the greeting, we all have to squat until he tells us to get up. So we do. Now, one day, I'm out doing gear guard with a buddy. Apparently, the SDI came on deck and told everyone to stop squatting. Coming back from gear guard, I didn't know that. He comes on deck, I squat, and no one else is. I look around. I crack a smile, and that was the oh crap moment. Though, instead of just getting smoked, he told me he wanted me to sing. Side straddle hops and mountain climbers, Marine Corps push-ups, double timers. While doing the exercises I was singing. The tune, the wheels on the bus go round and round. So it goes into the duty hut and I start. At first I was quiet and wasn't into it, but I decided, screw it, let's go for it. So for the next 20 minutes, approximately, I was belching out wheels on the bus go round and round with those lyrics as loud as I could sing it while doing those exercises. The rest of my platoon was cleaning rifles. Everyone freaking lost it after a few minutes, even the DIs. All 3 of them covered their faces and just stood there laughing. It was amazing, and a really, really good workout. I was exhausted. Marine Boot Camp. We had a guy that somehow got his watch through the in-dock. They take all your crap when you first get there. Well, the DIs found out he had it when they saw him wearing it one day, so they put him in the squad bay trash can and put the lid on it. Every time they walked by and kicked it, he'd pop out with his watch and yell, "Sir, the time on deck is 09:45!" And then go back into his can like the freaking Grouch from Sesame Street. It was really, really hard not to laugh at that. During my first deployment to Iraq as a 50 cal gunner, I had a salty sergeant for a team leader. Dude had been at the tip of the spear for the Iraq invasion, been to Baghdad in 2005, and now he was back for his 3rd time in 2007. Not only was he intimidating, but he knew how to discipline your butt if you stepped out of line. I was a stupid, young, private first class with about a year in the Army. I knew what was right and what was wrong, and thankfully, was able to get on his good side. Our driver though? Nuh-uh. He was a short, stupid specialist with a crustache who recently did 4 years in Korea. This dude was so off, he even re-enlisted for it when his first stint was over. Dude was just freaking weird and gross. Always had an excuse for everything, nothing was ever his fault. He loved trying to pass the blame down my way, mostly because he outranked me. Our sergeant normally knew what was up and corrected him accordingly. Well, during a convoy security mission one day in southern Iraq, he hit a pothole. Like, a big one. Probably 20 foot long by 20 foot wide. Our sergeant flips out, asking what the heck he was doing. The driver tries blaming it on me, saying I never let him know it was there. Since I was the gunner, I had to make everything aware to him because I was the eyes and ears. The sergeant chews him out, saying it was the driver's fault he didn't avoid the pothole since I was up top scanning for threats. We were the lead vehicle, so it's not like this pothole was obscured by anything, especially since it was in broad daylight. The driver then starts saying, "I don't know, Sergeant. I couldn't see it because I'm short." He wasn't that short. Guy was maybe 5'7", give or take an inch. He wasn't paying attention, and that's what the sergeant wanted to hear, because it was the truth. Well, this irritates the heck out of our sergeant, and he calls for the entire convoy, something like 20 semis, 6 Humvees, and 2 M111-7 ASVs, to halt. He then tells me to pass down an empty 50 caliber can. I do so with a quickness. The sergeant then passes the can to the driver and makes him use it as a booster seat. The driver protests, then my sergeant gives him a direct order to do so. The driver backs down and does it. At every gate to every base we approached, my sergeant made the driver open the door and show every guard what he was sitting on. Then he was forced to sing, "I'm a little teapot, me, oh my, I sit on a high chair so we don't blow up and die." Most of the guards just laughed their butts off. A few radioed for other guards to come see it. He was the laughingstock of our battalion for months. A recruit in USMC boot camp thought he was special because he was an Eagle Scout. The drill instructor picked up on this, and during PT, took him into the woods and made him build a nest. Then, he had to squat over it in order to keep his eggs warm. When we were heading to Iraq, we had to pass through Kuwait. Kuwait, being the transient hub for soldiers heading to and leaving Iraq, it is very chaotic. As a result of jet lag and the chaotic nature of Kuwait, my buddy had brought his weapon to the shower, but forgot to grab it on his way back to the tent. Shortly after he left, a sergeant came bursting through the door to see him sitting on his cot, messing around with his new video camera he had just purchased to bring on the deployment. His punishment was to get up, take his weapon and camera, and go sit in the community shower area and make sure no one else leaves their weapon in the shower for the night. So, what would you see when you went to take off your clothes to get in the shower was a fully dressed guy with a video camera just sitting there looking at you. There was a time when we made a private sweep all the sunshine off the sidewalks. It took the poor guy all day. One of the first days in basic, a guy in my platoon was standing at attention while having his room inspected by the instructor. It didn't matter how nice his room was because there was a large piece of fuzz/fluff on his shirt that immediately drew the sergeant's attention. Imagine a female French-Canadian sergeant with this accent. "Recruit Bloggins, what is that on your shirt? Is it a fluffy?" "Yes, Sergeant. Why is there a fluffy on your shirt, Bloggins?" "I must have missed it, Sergeant." "Missed it? It is so huge. How did you miss such a big fluffy?" She picks it off of him. "Hold out your hand." He holds out his hand and she places it in his palm. "This is Mr. Fluffy. Find a home for him, like a pill bottle or something. From now on, whenever I want to see Mr. Fluffy, you must bring him to me." And so, for the rest of basic, every time the sergeant found a piece of fuzz, she would yell out, "Mr. Fluffy!" And Bloggins would have to march over to her and present Mr. Fluffy, and she would formally hand him the new piece of fuzz to add to Mr. Fluffy. There was heck to pay if he didn't have Mr. Fluffy with him at all times. Week 1 in Army basic training, we had a soldier ask for an omelet in chow line, which was not allowed because there was absolutely no time to make custom omelets for every single basic training soldier. The cook started making the omelet when a drill sergeant asked what the heck was going on. The basic training soldier replied, "Go around, drill sergeant, I'm waiting on an omelet." Needless to say, this was the wrong thing to say and do week 1 in basic training. Our platoon motto was henceforth, "Go around, drill sergeant, I'm waiting on an omelet." And the basic training soldier was henceforth named Private Omelet. In the Marine Corps, when we really screwed up, we would go, quote, fishing. It is where you squat down like you're sitting in a chair and hold a shovel out in front of you in the air like a fishing pole. Then, you just sit there for a long time, and if the shovel would start to droop down, my sergeant would grab the tip of the shovel and start to shake it and make me pretend I was reeling in the big one. One time, me and a buddy got in trouble together, so they made him fish and me flop around on the deck like a fish he had already caught for almost an hour. Now jump on the deck and flop like a fish! SpongeBob SquarePants! We were deployed in Iraq, and a guy was peeing in water bottles instead of walking to the bathroom at night. This is a common thing, but this guy wasn't getting rid of the bottles. He'd keep them underneath his cot for some reason. When the first sergeant found this out, he made the guy report to the commander while holding all of his pee bottles in a box in front of him. They tore into this guy while he was holding a box of his own urine. Guy in basic dropped the biggest turd you've ever seen in the commode. So he shows the drill sergeants, who then make him suit up in full combat gear, weapon and all, and guard it all night. The whole, "Halt! Who goes there?" Pretty amusing. Navy basic training. All of us are doing push-ups. When the instructor says down, everyone counts. When the instructor says up, one guy in particular, the screw-up, is told to shout, "Would you like fries with that?" The instructor told him to get used to it because that's what he's going to be saying for the rest of his life. Down. 1. Up. Would you like fries with that? Down. 2. Up. Would you like fries with that? There was a pool of tears from laughter on the floor below me. I wrote a bad check while stationed in Korea, $2.06 over the limit. My punishment? To cut the parade field grass with scissors by morning. Had to cut the PT field with scissors along with 3 other guys because while we were buffing the floors, one of them somehow managed to get a candy bar and it fell out of his pocket in front of a drill. Everyone just froze and stared at the Snickers. It's like seeing a bus come at you in slow motion. You can't move, you can't speak, you just watch. Edit: candy is strictly forbidden, along with sodas, snack foods, laptops, phones, etc. Your only belongings are what you are issued minus stationery and, depending on the drills you have, photos. For 3 or 4 months, you only eat what they feed you and you only do what they tell you. The food though? Good lord, the food. Breakfast was freaking awesome, and dinner was usually extremely filling. You didn't go hungry at all. Since you signed on that dotted line, you signed away all privileges for 3 months. I was in a gender-mixed company in basic. The 3rd floor of the barracks was split with females on one half and males on the other. Males were not allowed in the female half and vice versa. My platoon was out back practicing throwing grenade bodies, and a window on the female side of the 3rd floor opened, and a male sneaked out of the window onto the ledge. It was immediately obvious to everyone, including our drill sergeant, that he had been in there messing around with the female, and a drill sergeant must have come down the hall, forcing him to get out onto the ledge so he wouldn't get caught. Our drill sergeant looked at the guy for a minute and then yelled, really sarcastically, "Don't do it, Private, you have lots to live for." Then they put him on self-unalive watch and made him hand over his belts and tie and shoelaces and everything that he could hang himself with and made him drag his newly bare mattress out into the hallway next to the fire guard desk and sleep out there every night until we graduated 4 weeks later. And they made his battle buddy sleep on the floor next to him for the first week. TLDR, male caught messing around with female, treated like potential self-unalive for remaining month of BCT. Officers can't punish soldiers with any punishment that doesn't follow guidelines. That said, they could be ordered some stupid things. My friend got ordered to move a box weighing about 50 pounds from the barracks to the shower every 2 minutes for 2 hours. The officer's reason for it was because he didn't know where to put it and was trying to decide if it should be at the barracks or the shower. In the end, he ended up telling him to load it up in the truck. Having to apply suntan lotion to a crap ton of large rocks so they, quote, don't get sunburned, then having to flip every rock and reapply as needed. I once spent 12 hours cleaning screens on windows. That doesn't sound bad, does it? Try this. Find a small wire about the same gauge as the holes in your window screen. Gently push the wire through the hole in the screen to make sure that the hole is empty. Repeat for 3 minutes, then look away from the screen. Anything weird with your eyes? Try it for hours. Had a guy in a warehouse drop a pallet load of assorted nuts and bolts off a forklift. Boxes broke open, 100,000 little nuts and bolts everywhere of various sizes. He had to sweep them into a pile, repair the boxes, fit each nut to a screw to make sure of the size. The pile was then inspected, then he had to remove each nut from the screw and place the screw in the proper box, then place the nut in the proper box. Probably 25 or 50 per box, I don't remember. Doesn't sound too bad, right? Took 3 12-hour days. He wasn't allowed to sit down. He had to bend over at the waist, pick up a tiny nut and screw, straighten up, screw them together, then bend over for another. More than 100,000 times. Think about it. During an inspection and basic training, a piece of lint was found in our dryer. I ordered to, quote, handcuff the intruder and construct a detention facility where the intruder could be interrogated. I was to have an in-depth report on who he was, where he was from, and what he was doing in the building. My grandfather, who was a Korea veteran, had a story about a guy who kept getting things taken away from him as punishment. Apparently, before it was over, he had no socks or shoelaces, no underwear, and they took the inside part of his helmet. My brother told me that when he was in basic, a drill sergeant yelled at this guy to, quote, beat his face, meaning to do push-ups. Said guy had no clue it meant that, and promptly punched himself in the face really, really hard and fell to the ground. The drill sergeant had to walk that one off, and my brother said you could hear him laughing hysterically as he walked behind a building. Not totally relevant, but I figured I'd share. Drill was smoking us one morning, and one of the other boots kept making karate sounds on the up on the push-ups. Drill was down with us, so he'd shout, down, hold it, to the left, and up, and you'd hear, hi-ya! In a long, low, guttural grunt. Eventually, everyone is laughing, including the drill, at the up sounds. Finally, he collapses in a fit of giggles and shouts, I hate all you suckers. Then he walks over to the other drill, who is snickering, and says, I quit. I can't smoke these suckers if they make me laugh. Didn't see him until after chow. Another from basic was, a private was caught walking to the showers without wearing his clothes, just holding his towel and walking nude. The showers were in the same bay, and it was just males in the bay, but a female drill from another platoon came in and saw him and made him drop and give 50 push-ups while nude. A buddy of mine had a DI that would make anyone who did anything stupid chug a smart water, quote, in case it helps. A guy I worked with had a habit of falling asleep at his desk. He was a real scumbag. Unfortunately, he was also a 1-star general's son. They made him sit at his desk with one of those exercise yoga ball things. The sucker still fell asleep, but he would hit his head on the desk or fall over. He also decided to tell his supervisor he had an appointment, but instead took a nap in his room. They called the cops on him and had him arrested for dereliction of duty. Fun stuff. Got caught in basic with my iPod, and I ran around the camp for near 2 hours with my iPod over my head, shouting, I'm a stupid jerk for bringing my iPod in the field, as the, quote, enemy was attacking our camp. I then proceeded to put my iPod in a plastic bag, then taped it onto my helmet, and from there on, I responded to Private iPod. When my instructor shouted play, I had to sing, skip, I had to switch songs, etc. It lasted 2 weeks, even during the night when I had 1 to 2 hours to sleep. Throwaway to protect the innocent. I was once in the Navy, stationed at Kings Bay, a Navy submarine and training base in rural southern Georgia, USA. A stone's throw away from Florida. Due to this base may or may not contain nuclear weapons, there is a Marine Security Detachment/Battalion/something stationed there as well. The majority of these poor sods were just out of Marine kill camp and were hot and heavy to go off to Middle Eastistan and, quote, shoot them some towel heads. Unfortunately, they'd landed themselves in a swamp in rural southern Georgia. Needless to say, they typically made very poor choices. Their superiors, however, normally disciplined them well. Amongst the punishments I witnessed were the following. Number 1. A group of Marines had decided to play soccer with an armadillo, killing it. They were forced to perform a full military funeral for the poor creature, then stand honor guard at its grave for a week, 24/7, in full dress uniform. In the middle of the summer. Remember, this is in a swamp in southern Georgia. Number 2. I happened to be out early one Sunday morning, chain smoking and drinking coffee outside of the Navy barracks, when an interesting sight came by. There were 13 Marines, 12 of them were running and carrying a telephone pole on their shoulders, 6 in front, 6 in back. The 13th man was in the middle of the pole, hanging from it, doing pull-ups, as the telephone pole was being carried by the other 12 running Marines. After a certain number of pull-ups, he would swap with one of the carriers. Number 3. Speaking of, this base may or may not contain nuclear weapons. The Marines had to do regular patrols, driving slowly around in Humvees or armored cars around the storage bunkers and the base at large. Apparently, there was a problem with the Marines in the vehicles falling asleep and running off the road. A brilliant NCO had the following great idea. Only one Marine would be in the vehicle, whilst the other Marine would be running behind it. If the vehicle were to start swaying off the road, the runner would awaken his driver comrade and they'd swap. It didn't take long, however, for this plan to fail. Patrol vehicle went off the road, crashed, and the Marine running stayed the course, smacking into the back of the vehicle and rendering himself unconscious. Some idiot gun bunny didn't check pressures before they took their piece out onto the field. Instead of being smart and zipping his lip, he said something stupid to the master gunny about the cooler temperatures causing the pressure to drop. For 13 hours the next day, he had to deflate every tire on every artillery piece, refill them to spec with the hand pump, and if anyone asked him what the heck he was doing, he had to yell, "I am replacing the summer air in the tires with fresh winter air!"
What is the worst second-hand embarrassment you've had to suffer through? I was in a class with about 50 other people when this really nice quiet guy stood up and started to play Gangnam Style out of his phone and started doing the dance with a wide grin on his face. Nobody laughed, so he sat down after about 10 seconds of singing and dancing, and the lecturer proceeded to carry on with the lecture. Gangnam Style, frickin' hell. That brings me back to some bad memories. I worked in the ad industry, and every company suddenly wants to be in and go viral with Gangnam Style. A few good months after it hit its peak, those hours pleading with clients that filming their employees doing the dance was a bad idea, Lord help me. Yeah, he showed up to all the other lectures as usual for the rest of the semester, but just didn't really say anything. He was always quite reserved, so I didn't really notice a change in his behavior. Looking back on it, I do feel sorry for him because I used to listen to that song every day, and maybe I could have offered him a sympathy laugh, but at the time I thought he just looked like a bit of a member. In middle school, a kid decided to don his karate wear and break a brick for a talent show. This intense music starts playing and he comes out, bows his head and hi-ya! Hits the brick. It doesn't break. He tries a couple more times, it remains unperturbed. He stomps off the stage in tears. I'm sure to console him, people told him, "Nobody will remember this in 10 years. It's been more than 10 years. I still remember him as the kid who couldn't break the brick. Stuck on a cruise ship for 3 days after my friend proposed to his girlfriend on the first fricking day, and she said no. The same first night she made out with a random guy in the hot tub. I'm honestly not sure how devastated my friend actually was, but it was intensified by the fact that he had drunk himself insensible by 2 p.m. every day, which would lead to him going to beg her to get back with him. At one point, she was sitting on the new guy's lap at the bar, and he grabbed her hand and confessed his love for her, for what must have been the 5th time in 2 days. It was a constant battle of trying to pull him away and convince him to either go to sleep or come with us to another part of the ship. He is a good friend, so I felt terrible for him because that was super crappy on her part, and tried to help him all he would allow, but it was awful to watch. And by the end of the cruise, it seemed like the entire boat knew what had happened. When I tried to bring it up with my girlfriend, who was on the cruise with me as well, days after we got home, she straight up refused to talk about it, saying that it was painful enough at the time, so we never need speak of it. I mean, honestly, it sounds like that was a good relationship to get out of if that's how both parties behaved. Some commenters expanded on this theory below. Was the proposal an attempt to save the relationship? Guys often propose when they feel the person slipping away from them. A common case is a girl wanting to back away from any serious commitment, but the guy actually wants it. I feel like this isn't 100% of the whole story here. No story that makes someone out to be that much of a victim is 100% the whole story. Like, I'm sure it was super messed up, but every situation has 2 stories. I think on a ship, each story is called a deck, actually. Have this uncle who's extremely cheap and once took us out to dinner. After he got the bill, he asks for the menu again and takes out his calculator and starts double-checking the bill prices and menu prices. This goes on for 15 minutes while the waiter patiently waits next to the table. At the end, he realizes he forgot his wallet and asks us to pay. I don't think I've ever tipped that generously. He didn't forget. No crap. We have printed tip suggestions ranging from 18 to 25% with the amount the tip would be and the total your bill would come to at the bottom of our receipts at my job. They're mainly for people who don't want to calculate it in their head or people from cultures that don't tip. But some people really believe that you have to tip one of those exact amounts and want to speak to a manager about being swindled. Even when we explain that they're suggestions, they somehow think they're requirements. Airline pilot here. The captain and I had a guy from another airline riding in the jump seat between us in the cockpit of a US airline jet. The captain was a bit of a blowhard loudmouth and decided to make a comment when he saw an Air India plane. You know what I hate most about Indian women is the big red dot on their forehead. The jump seater said, "My wife is Indian," and produced a photo from his wallet of his family, including his Indian wife with the bindi on her forehead. The captain only made it worse while he squirmed by asking some crap like, is she from Eastern India or Southern India? Because I'm referring to the ones from... And my mind was cringing so horribly I blanked out on the rest of the conversation. Oh, so he wasn't a racist, just a regular racist. Recently went to a wedding where the groom had 5 or 6 different groomsmen, and they all gave a speech. The first few were pretty good and funny. The last guy that went tried way too hard to make it funny. He started off with some lame cliché joke about how the bachelor party was crazy and that they'd never talk about it again. He actually paused and waited for laughter, and not a single person laughed out of over 150. Then his hands started shaking and he kept losing his place. I think he eventually gave up after about 2 minutes of torture and just said, "To the bride and groom." It was horrific. Was at a friend's brother's 21st and was standing around talking with some other guys. On the driveway, a bunch of girls were dancing to the music. It was a really chill night, but it was about to get a lot chillier. The guy next to me said to the guy on the other side, "How about the rack on that blonde chick?" The other guy replied, "That's my daughter." The first guy mumbled something and left at a brisk walk. It can be worse, believe it or not. My significant other was helping his mum reminisce by looking at her old sports team photos from when she used to play hockey. Significant other and his mate both point and go, "Whoa, who's that one?" And of course, it was her. She was apparently really flattered by it, though. I mean, Freudian complexities aside, it's just nice that the person gave their mum a nice esteem boost for a while. Probably a good thing that the friend was there to place the blame on. When I was in the 7th grade in Texas history class, we had an in-class assignment in groups of 3 that required us to read a passage from the textbook and then summarize it in a skit for the class. I was grouped with a good friend who we call Karen and a girl who was known for being really socially awkward, who we will call Janice. Janice was that type of socially awkward girl that tried really, really hard to be cool, but failed miserably while wearing a Naruto headband every single day. Our passage was about cattle herding, and for some reason Janice got it into her head that it would be hilarious to hum the Star Wars theme song, but instead of regular humming, moo it. She wanted to moo the Star Wars theme song at the end of the skit. She tried to convince us, but Karen and I did not want to get destroyed by our classmates, so we refused. When it was our turn, we completed our skit and started to head back down, and Janice looks at us and screams, "Please!" And we both just shook our heads. She burst into tears and explained to us that she wanted to do something cool for the performance, but we refused, so could she just please do it on her own? The teacher told her to go ahead. Janice, still sobbing, stood in front of the class and mooed the entire Star Wars theme song, but the tune was unrecognizable since she was sniffing and gasping in between moos. So we all just kind of sat there for a solid 5 minutes, watching this girl in a Naruto headband bawl and moo. 2 stand out from one high school English class. A dude got called out by our teacher for plagiarizing while he gave a report in front of a class in a book we read. In particular, she asked what "in lay thinking" meant, and he stood there for a good 10 seconds of silence before she lectured everyone on not copying from other sources. Another kid in our grade died from taking too many substances. He was pretty popular and his death shocked the school for a good while. Several of his closest friends were in this class. The day after his death, our teacher was out sick and we had a substitute. Naturally, she called out this guy's name during roll call. That hushed the class to the point of searing awkwardness, and some guy started sobbing. You could still see the slow dawning horror on the sub's face. You managed to trigger a cringe that had been blocked by my mind since it happened in 1997. Holy crap. 7th grade, a kid 2 grades above us died in a car accident. It really shook up the small town as he was a partying drunk and he and his friends went driving. Very much one of those can't happen to our town kinds of things. Cue roll call in social studies the day after the funeral. A kid in our grade shared a very common first name with the kid who died. Teacher says, "James?" Before James can even say here, frickin' Isaac yelled out trying to be funny, "How can he be here? He just died!" Absolute silence. I mean, what the frick do you say to that? And in case you haven't cringed into oblivion yet, this was the day that the dead kid's sister, who was in our grade, returned to school. She was going to take more than the week and a half to recuperate, but liked being around friends to help her get through it. My sister was on a first date with some guy she met online, and was nervous, so she had my significant other and I meet up with them. The guy was super braggy about being able to speak German, not knowing that my significant other was raised there and speaks it fluently. So my significant other tries to start a conversation with him in German. The guy apparently only spoke a few words of German and left embarrassed and without any chance of a second date. My significant other still feels a little guilty about it. Ich bin ein zwanghafter Lügner. Watching a friend be punished by their parents. It's so frickin' awkward. Oh my god, when I was 7 or 8 at a friend's house and he said crap while we played Mario Kart and his mum heard from the other room. She pulled him over her knee and started to give him a smacking on the rump. So I immediately tried to leave and the mum said, "Don't worry, he deserves this, you can stay." I was really weirded out and left anyways. As I closed the door behind me, my buddy was giving me a look that I'll never forget. I have a friend, Jake, who's partially deaf and he has hearing aids to help with that. We're cameramen and we were live streaming a college basketball game. We wear headsets to speak through the crowd and he has to take his hearing aids out to use it. He and I were taking a break during halftime and an old man who had a bag of candy, already weird, right, walked up to us and offered it to Jake. Jake, who still had his hearing aids out. Jake accepts this as the man giving us a bag of candy when in reality he just offered a piece to each of us. Yep, plenty weird. Jake just walked off with the candy bag, munching away as the old man helplessly tried to follow him through the crowd, yelling, No, I just meant to take one, Jesus Christ! I was uncomfortable in so many ways, I just walked away from the situation. Sounds like I need to get a fake hearing aid so I can just grab stuff and go. Actually, no, that would be morally condemnable. Tempting, though. I was on a train going between London and Manchester, UK, and went to use the bathroom. The toilet at the end of the carriage was disabled accessible, so it had a wide curved door that automatically opened at a steady and slow pace, about 20 to 30 seconds to completely uninterruptible retracting in a semicircle to allow wheelchair access to the carriage. If you've travelled on these trains before, you'll know that to close the door, you enter the stall, push a button to close the door, then when it's finished closing, you press another to lock it. Someone had not told this to the lady in the loo. Just as I arrive, another person coming from the other direction pushed the outside button to open the door, and it started its inevitable arc. For at least 30 excruciating seconds, the button pusher, myself, and eventually everyone sitting in the packed commuter carriage behind, who was facing in our direction, got to see the woman bend up from the seat, reach and hop to the other side of the cubicle, and desperately pummel the door, close, and lock buttons inside. Pants around the ankles the whole time, white bottom flashing. At a merciless pace, the door opened fully, contemplated its life, and then closed on the pitiful image within. The button pusher and I looked at each other, said nothing, and went back to our seats. I've seen this happen before. The poor guy got revealed like some crap prize on a game show. You'll never expect what's going to be behind door number 2. It's a guy going number 2. I'm usually the subject of first-hand embarrassment, but this time, a local radio station I listened to hosted some kind of Christmas charity event, where the DJS stood outside some kind of children's charity drive and talked about it to the people giving donations. They'd been playing music in between, asking people their names and talking about how much stuff they'd given, like, "Thanks to Dave from Cityville for the $300. Say hi, Dave." Dave, hi, you're welcome, happy holidays, bye. The cringe begins when a guy named Josh comes in to give some money to the charity. The DJ? Wow, Josh has given us $3,000, the most generous donation of the day. Josh. Yeah, haha, I did. So how much do you have now? DJ. Thanks again, Josh. I think that puts us at 10,000. Josh. No. I mean, after what I gave you, how much do I have? DJ. We have $10,000 in donations. Josh. No, I mean, what number did my donation put you over? At this point, I've gone from confusion to realizing what Josh is trying to get the DJ to say. I'm actually facepalming for him. DJ, well, before you donated, we had about 8,000. Josh, no, that's not what I mean. DJ, I don't quite know what you're getting at, Josh. Josh, get it? Now you have over 9,000! DJ, what? Josh, get it? After what I gave you, you have over 9,000! DJ, yeah, I don't. Like, there's this show called Dragon Ball Z, and the guy in it, he says over 9,000. Oh, right, yeah. Alright then. Basically, a guy donated thousands in charity over the radio to just get the DJ to say, we have over 9,000. I'm pretty sure they didn't get the joke, and he tried to explain it to them. I don't remember a lot of the details or the exact amount, but I'm pretty sure the guy donated in the thousands. Government class senior year. Teacher makes a comment about how we should stay off our phones in class and be careful about the things we send out. Proceeds to pull up a classmate's tweet that says something along the lines of, "This teacher is so dumb, this class freaking sucks." She was on her phone, so she didn't see it pulled up immediately. When the whole class fell silent, she finally looked up and turned bright red. The teacher kind of chuckled and continued on with the lessons. To be fair, that teacher had amazing timing. I always get this when I watch guys hit on girls unsuccessfully. One particularly painful example was a good friend of mine who is not the best when it comes to flirting, and he'd just come out of a long-term relationship, so safe to say he was rusty. At any rate, he makes a beeline toward this girl. I try to intervene and assure him it will not work out. She was seeing someone, and her friend told me that my friend, currently making moves towards her, weirded her out a little. I pleaded and pleaded with him to just refrain from doing it, but he was having none of it, as he thought I just wanted to take a stab myself. Anyway, I watched helplessly as he moves towards her, slides up and attempts to hold her hand. She looks mildly scared, so he says to her in a fairly loud voice, "Don't worry, I'll hold you." At this point, I have to look the other way as I'm actually dying of embarrassment for him. She then slowly starts moving away, looking quite fearful, and then briskly walks outside. He comes back over and asks if he should go for her friend instead. Just remembered another story from the same guy around the same time. This time he had managed to pull, and he was cracking onto this girl and she was reciprocating, putting her hands on his leg, giving him the occasional kiss. Anyway, he gets incredibly smashed, and we're walking with a group of friends to another bar. The woman in question is walking behind us with her friend. He says incredibly loudly, "I am so in there, bro. 10 out of 10. Easy." She's obviously well within earshot. We arrive at the next bar, and she comes up to him and says, "Were you talking about me?" I've never seen someone look so on the spot. He stammers some answer about not meaning it like it sounded. At any rate, safe to say, this killed the vibe for a bit. She sort of distances herself from him. Undeterred, he continues to drink and attempts to start up conversations with her. Feeling a little bit freaked out, she asks her friends to leave. Now, they lived about 1 kilometer away from this bar. They all leave. My friend excuses himself about 10 minutes later. We all ask him not to go to this woman's house. He promises not to, and being drunk, we let him go. About 20 minutes later, I get a phone call from one of this girl's friends saying that my friend is drunk in their house, which was their parents' house, and is refusing to leave. Mortified, we had to go and collect him, sort of half-yelling apologies at their house. Oofed. I think we all know at least one guy like this. Generally, they grow out of it, and we're hopefully able to use these sorts of stories as cautionary and humorous tales for the rest of us. Used to be a bag boy at a grocery store. One day, I was bagging an older man's groceries, and the cashier begins to talk to him. In a polite voice, "Have you found everything you're looking for?" He gave no response. "Sir, have you found everything you're looking for?" No response. "Sir, have you found everything you're looking for?" The man, finally acknowledging the cashier, says, "Oh, hey, I'm deaf." The cashier apologized profusely, and the old man looked at her in disgust, while I did the brave thing and left to bring shopping carts back into the store. Sleeping over my friend's house in the 7th grade, I was trying to sleep on the floor. However, his parents decided to have very loud, wall-rattling fun times. I laid there trying to fall asleep for about 15 minutes when a loud shriek hinted that it was over. I kinda laughed a little, and my friend, who I thought was sleeping, just says, "I am so sorry." We awkwardly laughed about it, then went to bed. 3 women in a kitchen, one is pretty overweight and recently miscarried. I knew, the third person didn't, and started asking questions about how the pregnancy was coming along. I'm peeling carrots, just dying inside. The overweight woman who miscarried informed the woman that she lost the baby a month ago. I'm a coward and just pretended to focus on the carrots. Horrible. This was my freshman year of college in 2006. One of my Gen Ed class requirements was a minority studies class, and the only one left was women's studies. I figured it would be a perfectly okay class, and it honestly was. The problem was this guy in the class named Carter. Carter was the precursor to the modern-day "ladies, I must apologize for my gender, look at me, I'm such a good ally to women" guy, and every time he raised his hand, you could see a lot of people in the room cringe. He had said something dumb, and the professor had moved on to a new topic when he raised his hand again. He then said, "I just want to apologize for what my gender does to women." I feel like everyone in the class was staring a hole through their desks because of how utterly embarrassing this guy was. The professor said, Okay, if that's all you wanted to say, let's move on, and oh lord, does thinking about that still make me cringe. Oh boy, I've got one. An integral part of my architecture education were what we call critiques or juries. Basically, you'd present your work in front of a group of your classmates and professors, to which questions could be asked and suggestions be offered. It was an incredibly valuable part of our education, as getting and offering feedback really encouraged more critical thought about what we were doing. Unfortunately, it also meant that if you produced crappy work, you'd get torn to pieces. Anyway, come our final jury presentations for the semester, this one guy pins up his presentation materials and physical model and gives his presentation. It was bad. Seriously bad. Aside from only taking up a quarter of his allotted time, it looked like his presentation materials were half finished, after a night of fervent scrambling to get the work done. There wasn't enough to even start to ask questions or give suggestions to him. So everyone, trying to think of at least something productive to say, kept completely silent. It was probably only 15 seconds, but it was absolutely the most awkward silence of my life. Eventually, one of the professors spoke up and said something along the lines of, "If this is the kind of work you think is acceptable, you probably shouldn't look at continuing this program." To which the guy just replied, "Sorry," and walked out. He didn't show up the next year. So yeah, I've never felt as awkward even in situations where I'm the subject of the awkwardness. Probably not that bad in the grand scheme of things, but it's been going on for months now. My friend will just blurt out guesses to questions in my physical chemistry class. She sits in the front row, and before anyone has a chance to answer if they actually know, she will just randomly guess. Over and over again. It's so awkward because she's almost always wrong, and the teacher asks her to explain, and she doesn't ever have a good reason for what she said. Watching pallbearers lose control of the coffin they were carrying down a steep set of granite church steps after the funeral was over. An ice or sleet storm took place during the funeral service, so the steps were slick. Several pallbearers went down as the coffin landed on the granite steps and slid the rest of the way down to the sidewalk below. Fortunately, the lid didn't open, but we all felt badly for them as the look on their faces showed they were mortified. What's the most real relationship advice you can give? It's fine to not always want to spend 100% of your time with your spouse. Not every moment of every day is going to be bliss, and sometimes it really takes some effort. I love my wife to bits, but there are some days when I would just like to do things by myself. It doesn't mean our relationship isn't great, but it can be really refreshing just to take a stroll around a shopping center, or go get some food alone or something. This 100%. My spouse goes to a weekly Pathfinder game. That's his alone time. I occasionally go to a punk show or have a beer with my friends. It can be even simpler. I will go read a book in the other room and get my alone time. He likes to cook, so he'll start up in the kitchen and I stay away while he listens to his music. Everyone needs alone time. Don't lose yourself as an individual in a relationship. Happened to me. Where were you 10 years ago? Ah, but would you have listened 10 years ago? I think it's so important to have your own social lives and circles, but I see so many couples who bring their partner to everything, to the point that they're basically a part of every social group that person is in. Where does that person then have an escape to? When can they go out with their friends without the other one feeling bad for not being invited? Keep your own circle. My partner and I have been friends for years, even before we were a couple, so we have the same friend group. I combat this by asking when he wants me to tag along to outings like shopping, and also we have pretty chill home life. Also, we're not attached at the hip at events, and I know when to step back and let him have one-on-one conversations. I try and let him know that it's okay for us to do our own thing and I won't be offended. Sometimes I worry that I'm too much and we're not getting enough alone time, but we communicate well and respect each other. So if it ever becomes an issue, it wouldn't be one for too long. Communication is key. Make sure you're talking to your partner and finding out what they need and telling them your needs too. Intimacy is way more important than people realize. Like I've told my wife, yeah, sure, there's lust involved, but there's also interest in making your partner feel good as well. If that interest isn't there, your partner might as well be an adult fun time toy for all they mean to you. This is where I think a lot of people miss the point. Everyone seems to automatically infer that it's physical intimacy that's important. Intimacy is emotional. It's meaningful and vulnerable sharing of one's inner self. It's not what you do in bed. That's not hard. Real intimacy is hard, and it's super fulfilling to be intimate with your partner. So important, and physical intimacy begets emotional intimacy. Physical intimacy is our biggest way of being there for each other. Everyone needs a hug, everyone needs cuddles. Words can't always do what a good, genuinely loving hug can do. Go on holiday together. If you can agree on food, sleep soundly, compromise on activities, and do your own thing one of the days, and not get mad at each other, you stand a good chance of lasting a while. I love my boyfriend to bits and miss him a lot. We don't live together yet, but boy do I like sleeping in my own bed sometimes. Space is healthy. Just because you're in a relationship, it doesn't mean you have to live in each other's pockets. Given the sheer amount of friends that I've discovered I can't stand traveling with, finding someone to meet this comment's criteria seems impossible. Oh dear. When you disagree, remember that you're on the same team. You're supposed to fight a problem, not the other person. This is such an awesome way of putting that concept. 1. Don't expect the other person to be able to read your mind. 2. Be a team, not opponents. 3. Everybody toots at some point. Number 3 has been a hard thing for me during my current relationship. My significant other has a colostomy bag after battling colon cancer, which has been a huge learning experience in itself. I'm all for being comfortable with the body and all of its weird, icky processes, and I'm usually quick to make that known. But knowing that he physically can't toot makes me way more reluctant to do it around him. Like, I don't want to be a show-off, you know? My husband blames his toots on the baby sometimes, and for some reason I think it's hilarious to imagine a 7-month-old making that kind of gas. I know I found the right person. It wasn't easy though, damn. Communication is the foundation upon which everything else is built. They say don't go to bed angry, not because anger does something while you're sleeping, but because it means you didn't communicate properly and you're giving up on trying. Be calm, actively listen, do not dismiss your partner's statements, assume good faith. It's you and me versus the problem, not me versus you. If something's bugging you, talk to your significant other about it. If you feel enraged about something, wait until you're well-fed, well-rested, with warm extremities before talking about it, but talk about it at the first opportunity, calmly, rationally, and honestly. Keep the discussion limited to that one narrow thing. If something's bugging your significant other, hear them out. Never think, well, I'm not bothered by that, so it's not a problem. Think, my significant other is bothered by this, and that's a problem. If you think the concern is unreasonable, frame the discussion as solving the problem of your significant other is being unhappy. The worst fights and arguments happen over trivial things because it's not the trivial thing that's actually causing the problem. It's probably a series of things or a general lack of satisfaction, and the toothpaste cap being left off is just the instigator of the fight. If you communicate often and openly, these things will not fester, they won't pile up, and you won't get into such fights. Your spouse isn't going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. There will be mistakes and misunderstandings. What really matters in a relationship is not being perfect, but how you handle the imperfections of yourself and your spouse in a respectful, reasonable way. Learning how to be bored together is important. You don't have to be on the go, doing stuff and planning stuff and being fun and exciting all the time. It's okay to just sit around and not do anything and not talk to each other. It's not unhealthy, I promise. This was one of the biggest things I learned when I moved in with my significant other, and what I give as advice to couples just moving in. Especially when it's their first time living with a significant other, you have to learn how to be in the same room without actively hanging out together. When your whole relationship has been dates, it's hard to just be, without feeling like you should be interacting. Getting comfortable just chilling there, doing your own thing, is a good thing. There's so much pressure to do stuff, especially in the age of social media. Other couples do stuff all the time, and everyone is looking for adventures. We must keep up with the carefully manufactured images of other people put out on Instagram. In reality, it's not necessary and can often be a serious source of stress. My husband has been playing Ark all day, and I've been on Reddit or playing The Sims. We watched a couple of episodes of 10th Kingdom earlier, and that's all we've done together today. We're in the same room, but we're not doing the same things. This is not a bad thing. It's called being comfortable together. As someone who just started an official relationship, I got a glimpse of this when I went to visit my boyfriend's place about a week ago. I asked if I could try Overwatch on his PC, since I only have the console version, and he seemed happy to let me go ahead and do my own thing. He booted up Diablo on the couch, and I played a couple of matches. I asked him, "Are you sure this is okay? I can totally get off and spend time with you." He replied, "You're enjoying yourself, right? I'm totally cool just doing my own thing. Just because one of us visits doesn't mean we have to spend every minute together." It made sense when he put it like that, and actually depicts what I've heard about other relationships even when the couples aren't cohabiting. A relationship where I can just be okay playing Baldur's Gate for several hours at a time seems pretty damn good to me. That's the goal. It's interesting when people get confused by this. I always considered relationships to be autonomous. We should both be able to live our own lives, but us being together makes it better. At the same time, romantic relationships are just that. You should be dating your best friend. Your best friends sometimes do nothing with each other. My friend and I once got into a study room after class and did our homework for literally 2 hours with minimal talking. I looked at her around 1 in the afternoon and asked if she's hungry, and we grabbed lunch. It's kind of the same thing. You have to be honest with them, especially when it's hard to do. Me and my boyfriend get uncomfortably real with each other sometimes, and something we've both learned is to listen to criticism without getting defensive. And when giving criticism, we don't attack each other, no matter how angry or sad we are at each other. I've had him call me out for certain behaviors that nobody has ever called me out on, and I've done the same for him. We're both better people for it because when we get it all out on the table, we have no choice but to work on ourselves. There's a reason it's called the honeymoon phase, and eventually you won't have as much to talk about other than how the day went, or might not always feel those butterflies in your stomach when you think about them. That's when it becomes a test in the relationship, and you both have to work on it to make it work. You'll get into fights, but learn to get over them, or I doubt it will last. Resentment can kill feelings for someone. I wanted to add, I'm not a love or relationship expert by any means. I'm just going off things I've seen and gone through with my own husband. You trade butterflies for familiarity, excitement for comfort. I love the comfort stage. The butterflies are great and all, but being in a constant state of infatuation would get exhausting after a few years. It's so nice to do absolutely nothing with your person, or not see them for a day or two if you don't live together, and still be completely content with them. In an ideal relationship, the contributions are 60-40, where both partners are the ones trying to give 60%. My mom asked an elderly couple who'd been married for decades what their secret was. They said that they act as if being nice to each other is a competition. That's always stuck with me. I've been married for 28 years. When I was engaged, a dear lady, then in her 80s and still very much in love with her husband of 60+ years, told me this: "Just because he's your husband, don't think he requires less regard than your friends. Before you yell at him for something, anything, ask yourself if you would yell at your friend for the same thing." What she was trying to say is that being married, together, is not a free pass to stop being a decent human being. You're going to get annoyed by the socks on the floor, but is it an excuse to fly off the handle? Respect and common courtesy are my recommendation, and you don't need to keep score. There's no winner. I can't praise this enough. I see couples snap at each other all the time over the silliest stuff and wonder how it must feel to be constantly on guard like that. Just be nice to each other. If you can't stand to be nice to each other, call it a day, man. Life is too short. My husband and I have to check in on each other every once in a while. For some reason, it seems like I'm meaner to my husband when my family is around, and he's meaner to me when his family is around. We come up with a phrase that we whisper if we're in public: "Quit being a butthole." We use it to remind each other to be nice without having to justify ourselves at the moment. It really works because if he says it to me, I automatically check myself, even if I don't think I'm being mean. I love him and I never intend on coming off as a butthole. Listen to them, communicate with them, compromise sometimes, and frick them regularly. To elaborate on compromise, it doesn't always mean something we'll both enjoy. At times, it will very likely mean today we do something that my partner likes and that I sparingly tolerate, but tomorrow that reverses. My ex refused to see that side of a compromise. I would see horror films with her, because to me, spending time with her was more important than avoiding seeing a horror film. If I wanted to see a film that she wouldn't like, asking her to see it with me was forcing her to do something that she didn't want, and was therefore unfair. And for the love of God, do not start dating a new person as a way to get out of a bad relationship. That is extremely unfair to the new person you entered into a relationship with. Guy here, this probably sounds simple, but here's what I've learned. Know yourself, where you're at in life. If you're in a crap storm, legal crap, money crap, substances and booze crap, legal crap, you're probably not ready for anything serious. Clean up your act first. Be honest. No matter how fricked up your crap is, if you want to move forward in a serious way, all the cards have got to be on the table. Take it slow, get to know each other, but in the end, no secrets. There is some crap that's nobody's business, but I'm not talking about that. Know her, what she's been through, and what she wants out of life. You both need to be pretty much on board. You need to be heading for the same thing. Kids, buy a house, or gypsy life, doesn't matter. Keep an eye on things, you need to make sure she's doing okay, and let her know you're doing okay. Same with her to you. After that, it's just dodging stupid. Sometimes you have to spend years with crappy people to realize what you deserve. It was never a waste, you needed the experience to figure out what works best for you or what to avoid. You'll never forget your exes, they were there for a reason. Good to get something from the School of Hard Knocks on here. A lot of these is from people who seem to have been happily married or together for a long time. Sometimes you have to muddle your way through until it works. Relationships are work. They aren't always fun, you won't always be madly in love, and you can't put them on a shelf and ignore them. No, but you shouldn't shun the work. Too many of my friends are toxic in their relationships, ending them summarily just because any work is seen as too much. Or let relationships turn toxic because it's easier than maintaining healthy ones. Always be mindful and thoughtful to that person's love map. Like they might need a quick text every morning when you get to work letting them know that you're safe. It makes zero sense to you, but knowing it's something small and means the world to them, well, why the hell not? They might get stressed out, and you helping clean the house for when they finished work might mean more to them than someone else you've been with who wanted flowers to show love. Know what it is that your partner loves and make them feel loved too. And if it's just a text to say you love them and you're safe, it's a 10-second message to type. For frick's sake, that's so little time in the span of an entire day. Why not do it if you know that it makes them happy? A little off topic, but I've found that prioritizing the relationship correctly helps a lot. My roommate is my best friend, but he's a roommate first, a coworker second, and a friend third. We talk about finances and housework completely differently than we shoot the crap. This helps maintain efficient lines of communication regardless of what's going on. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. If they're mean, if they're vindictive, if they use you, if they show you that they don't really care about you, believe them. If they make you feel inadequate, on edge, scared, nervous, unworthy, or like a disappointment, believe them. If they're entitled, narcissistic, sociopathic, manipulative, or unfair, believe them. Life isn't a movie, and you can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. More often than not, they're just who they are. So take off the rose-colored glasses and stop thinking love will find a way. If it isn't working, change it. Don't spend your precious time lamenting over a person who wouldn't genuinely lament over you. This sounds bleak, I know, but relationships and love are supposed to be the most beautiful things in the universe. If your relationship is not improving your quality of life on the aggregate, you need to seriously reassess what you want in life, because you deserve better. You only get so much time to find people in your life that make it worth living. Don't get caught up on people who will make you wish you'd never lived it. Yes, you gotta make sure you're choosing them as advertised, not falling in love with their potential. Don't think your perspective is bleak at all. I think it's balanced and disillusioned. In related vernacular, choosing to believe who someone is a great example of living life on life's terms. It's not always easy, but it gets you out of a lot of unnecessary wrestling matches. Probably not going to get this right, but it hit me the hardest after spending 5 years in a toxic relationship. The idea that everyone in their lives is working toward creating a jigsaw, each part of their life, be it work, relationships, or hobbies, make up parts of that jigsaw. Everyone's is different. Some people's careers make up the edges, the less important and interesting parts. Some people's are their relationships. What's important is the center of the puzzle. That's what people are working towards, their life's goals. When you're in a relationship, your puzzles combine. You eventually start working towards a shared goal. You might make some compromises on what goes to the outer edges, but you should both be working toward the same center. Occasionally, it turns out that the centerpiece you were working towards with your significant other isn't what you thought it was. This sucks, believe me, it really freaking does, but there's nothing wrong with cutting your losses. If you're going for a different jigsaw and the pieces don't fit, you won't get a coherent picture. I hope I explained it right, and yes, it's been taken from Daniel Sloss. He puts it way better than I do, so I would recommend checking him out on Netflix. If you go into a marriage or long-term commitment with the impression that you'll be happy all the time and your life will only change for the better, you're absolutely wrong. Be realistic that there will be days where you won't be able to stand each other, your lives may absolutely hit rough patches, and you will not agree on how or why that situation occurred, or even how to get out of it, and the like. Came here to say this, and when you have kids it tends to get even more difficult and adds even more fights and resentment. Life changes, and so do relationships. The butterflies and weak knees only last so long, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing, it's just different. Don't just look for the person who makes your heart race, look for someone who you can also see being best friends with. Because in the end, that's what you become, best friends. Friends fight, but best friends always, or usually, find a way to work through it together. Oh, and it's also my experience that having one shared hobby and one independent hobby helps too. My husband and I game together, but if I need a break from him or vice versa, I'll go read a book and he'll watch sports or whatever. A study of long-term relationships found that successful relationships have one major thing in common. The spouses are verbally supportive of each other's interests and thoughts. For example, if your spouse is very excited about Pokemon Go and wants to tell you all about the monsters that they caught that day, the supportive spouse would listen to them talk about it and be excited for what they're excited about, even if they don't know how the game's played or they think that it's stupid. The couple that's going to divorce, that other spouse would say, "I don't care, that game is for kids," or be generally dismissive of the conversation and change topics. Support what they're excited about as much as you can, even if it's just listening with a smile on your face while you do a shopping list in your head. Without bypassing the obvious one, which is the importance of communication, my mother always told us how you say something is as important as what you're saying. From the tone to how a subject is approached or delivered can make the difference between opening a dialogue or having an argument. Another good one I've seen around Reddit, it's you, plural, versus the problem. If your significant other has a healthy relationship with their ex, especially when they have kids together, it's a good sign. Don't go to sleep angry is bullcrap, especially if you have little kids. If you and your partner are sniping at one another, disengage and get some sleep if it's possible. Most of the fights my husband and I ever had was because one or both of us were exhausted or hangry. But set a time to pick it back up, please. If my husband just says frick it and goes to bed during an argument, I'm angry. If he says, "I need sleep, let's talk tomorrow after dinner," I'm much better. I need to know it's going to be resolved in a timely fashion, and we're both much more reasonable after sleep and cooling down. Choose them. It's not about winning an argument, making a point, having enough time, or giving enough gifts, any of that crap that makes your heart either soar or tremble in the moment. It's about choosing them, knowing them, learning them. Equally as crucial, they choose you back. It's about choosing this person to hold your hand through every moment of every day for the remainder of anything and everything you'll ever experience. Every decision you make has them as a factor. It's about respect and admiration and giving credit where it's due. It's about the truth, about trusting them with the truth, and trusting them to tell it. Choose them, completely. Relationships are not there to fix you. If you aren't happy with yourself, the relationship won't make that a reality. When you want your partner to be fit, attractive, and dress well, don't forget that they want that as well. Want the best for the other person, not for yourself. That's why jealousy is poison. You want your significant other to look good, but only for you? Get a clue. Give them something to want in return. Be a success. Take care of yourself. Learn something every day. Don't waste your time. Be kind and demonstrate that daily. You get what you give. Do the dishes. What's the best witty comeback you've ever witnessed? Back in 10th grade, we had a long-term substitute physics teacher, younger guy, so the tough guys in class wanted to have a pee-pee measuring contest with him, like daily. They constantly made fun of him and joked about his wife. One day, I didn't hear the start of it, but one kid said something like, "I'll bury my face in your wife's chest." Teacher had obviously had enough and said, "No, the only D's you're ever going to see are your grades." The class exploded, nobody ever told on the teacher for saying that, and the guys stopped messing with him. Could a teacher even get in trouble for saying something like that at your school? They certainly wouldn't at mine. They were given wide latitude, especially if provoked. The only case of a teacher getting in trouble for crap was when a math teacher hit a kid for saying something about his, the teacher's, girlfriend. In other words, physical violence could get a teacher in trouble. Words, other than presumably slurs or maybe things that were entirely unprovoked, couldn't. Our geography teacher didn't even use our names, just called us little craps, vermin, emo kid with shampoo deficiency, etc. And we loved her. Sitting in a bar in a country well known for working girls, a guy walks in and starts yelling at a girl, "B-word, you gave me VD." She looked at him and said, "No, I didn't. You bought it." That guy got burned twice. I miss my late uncle. He was the wittiest motherfricker I ever knew. Not a joke teller, just had great one-line comebacks that were never mean, just funny. My favorite was when he went out to eat at a diner with his wife and my mum, just the three of them. The waitress said to him, "Lucky you get to eat with two ladies." My uncle replied, "Yeah, but can you hurry it up? I have to get home to my wife." My Uncle Bob was in a jewelry store a few years ago to buy a present for his longtime girlfriend. They'd been together for over 10 years and had a kid. The manager of the store was helping him as they were fairly busy, and she was called away on some managerial task and handed him to another employee, saying, "Would you help this man? He's looking for a bracelet for his wife." And my uncle said, "Oh no, this is for my girlfriend. I wouldn't spend money like this on my wife." He said the following stunned silence was deafening. He's also pretty deadpan, so they probably thought he was serious. "He seems like a funny guy." Could have been the same guy that came into my restaurant, and when asked by the hostess how he was, he replied, "Well, my wife and girlfriend have left me, so I'm looking for 2 new girls." I mean, let's hope that last one was a joke. There's something to be said for being comfortable enough with your relationship to pull these jokes off directly in front of your spouse, like the first guy did. My mum's dad passed away a couple of days previously. The night before the funeral, a dark and stormy night, the funeral home called 9 p.m. to tell my mother she had forgotten a tie for the suit for tomorrow's showing. She freaked out, realizing that she would have to drive over to the nursing home to fetch a tie and then drive to the funeral home. Dad, who loved himself his clip-on ties and had many of them, said, "Oh, don't go doing that trip on a night like tonight at this time of night. Just grab one of my clip-on ties and take it with you in the morning." My mum, who actually hated that my dad had never learned to tie a tie, responded without missing a beat, "My father would never be caught dead wearing a clip-on tie." Seconds after she realized what she said, she burst into tears. Savaged from beyond the grave. Ow! Grandpa, "In my day, kids were seen and not heard." Grandson, "So are the movies." Was talking to a friend about preferred positions in bed with a partner, and he said, "I like being on the bottom because all I do is frick up anyways." Classic self-roast. Not witnessed firsthand, but heard the recounting or legend many times. Growing up, a friend's older brother nearly got kicked out of high school for this exchange. The teacher, teaching about Jewish law around bestiality that's strictly forbidden, looks at a student and says, "Does this upset you, David?" David says, "Yeah, it means I can't do the deed with your wife anymore." He had to graduate late since he wasn't allowed back into that class. When I was training for my current job, our teacher chose to inform us that he and his wife had chosen not to procreate by saying, "All my children have 4 legs and tails." I have no idea where it came from, but I spat out, "Holy crap, I'd hate to see what your wife looks like." My class busted out laughing, teacher included. He went a little hard on me the next couple of days, but was a good sport in general. We had a lot of fun in that class, and a big part of that was all the crap slinging. Overly condescending boss looking over my work. "Can I ask a stupid question?" Me, on my last week at that job, "You seem overqualified." "You have a lot of options here." "Sure, I've seen you do it before. In my experience, yes. It's one of your core competencies." I stole this line from American Beauty and paraphrased it, but when my boss would say, "Hey, have you got a second?" I'd answer condescendingly, "For you, boss, I've got at least 30. He had a good sense of humor and thought it was funny every time. Works for, "Have you got a minute?" 2. "For you, I've got 3. Another good response to, "Can I ask a stupid question?" is, "You just did. Do you need to ask another?" I had a supervisor who was making fun of a guy's last name. The guy took it and didn't really say anything. When he was done, the supervisor asked him to email him something, and the guy wanted to clarify the spelling of the supervisor's last name, which was Windsor. He said, "Your name doesn't have D in it, right?" The supervisor said no, so the guy said, "Okay, just ooshbag then," and then walked away. Overheard. First guy, braggart and jerk, "I've got this great new job. I've got over 100 guys under me." Second, smartass, "What are you, mowing lawns at a cemetery?" "How many are on top," is what I would have said. Comedian. I remember the first time I did the deed with someone. Girl in the audience, "Yesterday?" Audience was laughing. Comedian, "I'm glad you remember." Audience, screams. I saw that video too. The text really doesn't properly convey how much the audience laughed at the heckler's joke, and how quickly and completely the comedian won the audience back. I was 13 in dance class with some older, catty girls. One of them was picking on me, which ended with her remarking, "Bite me." I responded with, "I'm trying to cut fat from my diet." Entire team heard it and proceeded to chastise me for being so mean. Served her right, the cow. Jimmy Carr was at another comedian's show and he started laughing. If you've seen him, you'll know how distracting that would be. The guy on stage, can't remember who it was, brutally savaged him with, "Jimmy, when I come to see your shows, I don't laugh at your jokes." Up until this moment, I've never appreciated how tough Jimmy Carr's strangled chicken of a laugh is to imitate. My apologies to the listeners. I remember some guy talking about this encounter he had in a grocery store. He was behind this woman who was giving the cashier a bunch of crap over something. She was being a real chump, and finally, sick of her attitude, he tells her to lighten up and stop holding up the line. He's getting kinda teed off that she's double-barreling this kid who's done nothing wrong. So she whips around on him and says, "This is none of your business." And he responds, "Listen, lady, I'm a veterinarian. B-words are my business." Don't know if that story's true, don't care. I thought it was amazing. Also effective, I'm a gynecologist. C-words are my business. I'm a proctologist. Buttholes are my business. Urologist works too. Members are my business. Guy in grade school was really into war history and building army models, fighter jets, aircraft, carriers, etc. He was quiet and smart, but handsome and part of the main crowd, athletic, etc., but very much a history/war buff. At a party, for whatever reason, he was kind of in an argument beef with one of the hotter and more popular girls in class. The greatest comeback I've ever heard was as follows. Girl: "Whatever, Dan, why don't you go play with your model planes?" Guy, immediately without missing a beat, "Great idea, I can land them on your flat chest." The reaction from the crowd added insult to injury as people went bonkers like it was a walk-off home run in a playoff baseball game. Never have I ever heard a better comeback, real or scripted, ever since. During middle school math class, one of the boys, overweight, was being made fun of by this petite girl. "You should put on a bra, you don't need it." "You should take off your bra, you don't need it." The class went, "Oh," and this guy got a few fist bumps. She cried. I've said a similar one. When I was at the beginning of the 7th grade, I didn't have any hair on my legs. This obnoxious girl noticed and said in front of everyone in the class, "Do you shave your legs?" real loud. I responded, "No, and by the looks of it, you don't shave yours either." Her smirk went to an instant frown, and the class went, "Whoa!" like you said, and the teacher laughed. Teacher was real chill. My grandfather died quite a bit before his time, and my grandmother would get a lot of calls for him. One telemarketing firm was particularly pushy, and one day an unbelievably condescending salesperson called and demanded to speak to the man of the household. My grandmother, who was normally restrained to a fault, replied, "Well, as soon as he comes back from the dead, I'll have him call you," and slammed down the phone. They actually did stop calling after that. A student told another one he wasn't the sharpest crayon in the box. That one responded with, "You're the sharpest because no one wants to work with you." Before you read on, please know that my relationship with my 14-year-old son is built on giving each other a hard time. I said a bad word, don't remember which or why. "You're a horrible mother." If I'm so horrible, how did you turn out so awesome? "I spent a lot of time with Dad." I got wrecked. "Son, can't wait to put you in a home." Me, "I should have drowned you in the bathtub." He's 21 and a butthole. My mum has a wicked sense of humor, and so does my brother. My brother is the middle child. My older sister and I would call my mum at least twice a day each. My brother would rarely call, which hurt her. She started telling him that I guess she failed as a mother and as he doesn't love her. He responded that she could always call him, which has led to at least 3 years of, "To my mother, cold and distant." Cakes, cards, text messages, you name it, from my brother. Had a really witty teacher from my game design class. The vice principal hated him for whatever reason. One day we were all studiously working with our headphones on, programming away while our teacher was up front reading a book. Very available and approachable if we had any suggestions. Then the VP walks into the room. VP, "Mr. Teacher, it has come to my attention that you have absolutely no control over your class. This is unacceptable." Teacher gives him a fairly nonchalant stare, coolly and calmly places his book down, and claps his hands loudly 3 times, which was his very effective way of getting our attention while listening to music. Mind you, the following occurred without us knowing why the VP was there or what he'd said. Teacher, "Okay class, listen up. I've got an exercise for you. This'll only take a few minutes. First and foremost, everybody stand up." We all stood up in near unison very quickly. "Good. Now all I want you to do is leave the room and stand outside in the hallway, and no matter what this guy says," as he points a finger at the VP, "do not come back into the room until I say so. Okay, go." We all exit the room, a little intrigued by what was going on. "Okay, VP, bring them back in the classroom." We didn't budge. To this day, that's one of my favorite stories to tell. That's a pretty big flex, to be honest, even if it's not quite in the neighborhood of the quick and snappy comebacks and the rest of the thread. Nice job though, teacher. When I was in high school, this very large, overweight kid who always picked on me waited till things got quiet in the classroom and said, "Dave eats wang." Everyone laughed and I got embarrassed and nervous, and a few seconds later, after people finished laughing, I stuttered out, "Yeah, well, you eat everything." I don't know where that came from, but holy crap, the entire room lost it. Haha. Special ed student. "You're so dumb, you make me look like a genius." I was the instructional aide and had to stop the other kid from trying to fight him, but that burn was so sick it got a chuckle out of me. One of my prouder moments. I was 17 and a 12 or so year old kid came up to me. "Hey babe, can I have your number?" "Why? Do you need a babysitter?" Not exactly a comeback or insult, but once in biology class we were going over DNA and genetics. We were talking about how traits can be inherited from parents to offspring flowers, and how some could have all the same traits and some could have mixed traits. The packet we used called the same traits flowers purebred and the other ones mixed. Then a girl in the class asked a question. "Have we ever tried to make purebred humans?" Teacher: "Yeah, some Germans in the 30s and 40s tried to." "Really? What happened?" World War II, followed by laughter from the rest of the class. I remember reading the possibly apocryphal story of a student being told no excuse would be accepted for not taking a test that was the next day. Some student decided to be funny and said, "What about sheer exhaustion from all the climaxes?" To which the teacher replied quickly, "I guess you'll have to write it with your other hand then." Churchill and some lady were having an argument. Lady: "Winston, if you were my husband, I would put arsenic in your morning coffee." Churchill: "Madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." Oh boy, have I got an answer for this one. So I'm sitting in my chemistry class, and there's a dude sitting ahead of me, Jeff. He's just minding his own business when two other dudes behind me, Butthead 1 and Butthead 2, proceed to start calling his name and ignoring him whenever he turns around. Just trying to annoy him, I suppose. Important to note, Jeff is a pretty intelligent guy, whereas Butthead 1 and Butthead 2 are so inbred they could be a sandwich. After this happens a few times, Jeff finally turns around and drops this line. "Hey, Butthead 1, can I borrow one of your extra chromosomes?" Overheard two guys in a restroom while at the urinals. Guy 1 tries to embarrass Guy 2. Guy 1: "What's with that red ring on your wang? You need to get that checked out." Guy 2: "It's just your mom's lipstick from when I saw her last night." Decent comeback, but the real burn is going to come from whatever red ring condition that guy has on his eggplant. The class clown of my classmates, let's call him K, was known for notoriously teeing off teachers with crude, obscene, and insulting jokes. Well, one day, K decided to ask a 30-something-year-old teacher, "Miss, ever had a baby?" In which the teacher replied with a simple no, but that's not where it ends. K then said to the teacher with a face that only appears on the stupidest of people, "Well, I could give you one," which caused a few sniggers in class. The corners of the teacher's mouth curled into a smile, and with grace she walked up to her desk and said, "No, Kay, I don't want to adopt you," which caused the whole class to erupt into laughter and Kay to shut up for the rest of that year in English. This is still one of the best comebacks I've ever heard, so simple yet so powerful. Oh, you might be able to get away with that in math class. Maybe history. But that kid had no chance against someone who had a far better grasp of the English language than he did. Me and a buddy were at GameStop just browsing and hanging out. Employee comes up to us and asks if we need help finding anything. We told him we were just looking. This was right after the Nintendo DS XL just came out, and he starts trying to sell us on it. Me never having been the handheld gamer type, I told him I wasn't really interested. He decided his ace in the hole would be touting the newer, bigger 4-inch screen. Having enough, I responded, "Take it from me, 4 inches isn't that impressive." That was the end of his sales pitch. One time I was at a coffee shop with my good friend and I saw a dime on the floor. Jokingly, I gave it to him and said, "There, you can buy yourself a life with this." It kinda sounds funnier in my language, and he quickly answered, "I'll just buy yours and give you back the change." I definitely envy people the ability to fire this kind of thing from the hip. I think I could memorize something like this and hold it ready for the right occasion, only to still completely mess it up when the time came. In high school, there was a jerk who was a local star athlete and was pretty much the high school cool athlete bully stereotype. His attempts to pick on people were pretty lame, but people always laughed at them because he was cool, and you always laugh at what the cool kid says. He liked to do "an 80-year-old woman called, she wants her upper back strength back" kind of jokes. He also wanted to go to Cornell on a wrestling scholarship. Not only did he not get the scholarship, he also didn't get accepted to Cornell. One day, when he was in the middle of his so-and-so called routines, I said, "Hey, Cornell called. Oh wait, never mind, no they didn't. Actually, I didn't think of that until the next day and is one of my life's greatest regrets. The jerk star called and… Was he a paper salesman named Andy? No, Andy got into Cornell." Douche frat guy walks into a circle of my friends at a party. Frat guy, "Is this the intellectual circle?" My friend, "Not anymore." Was he just trying to be friendly? With my friend at the bar where his girlfriend was working. She stopped by our table and spouted out general complaints about having to work. My friend hands her a straw. She just stares at him blankly. He says, "Suck it up." I've used this one before on a coworker when I worked at the convenience store/deli. She was complaining about some nonsense or another, and I seized the opportunity. The look on her face was priceless. I was just so casual about it, like I barely looked up from what I was doing when I handed it to her. I don't think she even realized I was listening. Our boss found it absolutely hilarious. Sitting around a fire, drinking, telling lies and whatnot, and a female friend asks, "Out of 10, how would you rate yourself in bed?" Quick as a flash, friend of mine says, 11. Come on, be serious, who am I going to tell? Hopefully, everyone. 11. I used to work in retail. Myself and the head of grocery had a call with a supplier where they were going to push really harsh trading terms with us in the short term because we were updating our contract to hold them more accountable for poor performance, delivery, etc. After the call, everyone was very busy discussing that we would just respond in kind later on. The head of grocery pipes up and says, "Yeah, we're going to get screwed in the butt now, but at least they'll get crap on their wangs." When I was a high school teacher, our assistant principal was caught having an affair. She divorced her husband, but it was all over the news. A few weeks later, a kid hung a banner in the hallway that read, "I can't cheat in school, but Mrs. Blank can cheat on her husband." Cool. Pretty good comeback from a 16-year-old. Must be a pretty small town for an affair to be on the news. Extremely small town. Tune in at 7 o'clock to see who hasn't cut their grass this week. There was a guy smarting off to the new guy dating his ex. "So, what's it like inside a hoo-ha that's used material?" The new guy, "Oh, only the first 2 inches were used, the other 6 are plain sailing." My wife gets mean on vodka. Not like starting a fight mean, more like destroy all ego mean. Winding down a party, close to blackout drunk, and most of us can't even remember how the conversation ended up, with chubby friend insulting wife's lack of chest and implying she should go buy some boobs. Wife says, "But those are expensive." Chubby friend cups his moobs and says, "These did cost me quite a bit." The wife closes the night with, "Just how much do you have to spend at Burger King to get a bosom like that?" I have an issue learning spoken language, so when I started French, I was doing horribly despite how much I was working. During a parent-teacher conference, my French teacher told my parents that I was incapable of learning French. My dad leaned in and said, "Madam, there are mentally impaired children in France who are capable of learning French. He's capable of learning, you're just incapable of teaching." I was tending bar at a place in Buffalo back in the 90s. Pretty girl at the bar lifts her glass to take a drink and accidentally spills some down the front of her shirt when she gets the lip of the cup to her mouth. The 4 to 5 people around her say nothing, and without missing a beat, she laughs and says, I must be full." When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.